Chapter 1105. Then you can go back. Yujie waved her hand and turned to enter the tent. However, the eunuch didn't leave immediately. After rolling his eyes a few times, he carefully approached the fallen gauze curtain. The gauze curtain was not thick and very light, but it was not very transparent. Only when he got closer, he could vaguely see the figure inside. "Your Highness, it's Great Elder Princess asking if you have eaten." The eunuch heard the servant girl who came out to answer him just now reported. "Thank you, Grandma." The extremely weak voice of a woman should be Princess Chen. "Your Highness, let me serve you." Another woman's voice came from inside. It was another servant girl of Princess Chen. "Just have some soup." "I can't eat it." Princess Chen's voice was very weak. "Your Highness, you are not in good health, so you should have more soup. Have some rice first and then have soup, okay?" The servant girl persuaded her. "Well, okay." Although Princess Chen was full of reluctance, she could tell that she was willing to listen to the servant girl's advice. The eunuch nodded with satisfaction, turned around, and left to report to his master. After the eunuch left quietly, Yujie said in a low voice, "Your Highness, the eunuch has left. Do you want me to follow him to see who is plotting against you?" "No." Xiao Wanru's eyes were like a cold pool. "It's useless for you to go. This is the imperial palace. Besides, the eunuch is not an important figure. Even if you stare at him, you will only see a servant in the imperial palace later. If you stare at him, you will find traces. Your Highness, do you want them to plot against you?" Yujie said angrily. They not only plotted against her master, but also sent a eunuch to check on her for fear that her master had not eaten. If it weren't for her master repeatedly telling her not to act rashly, she would have been so angry that she wanted to slap the eunuch. "No, there will be an accident later," Xiao Wanru said coldly. When the eunuch came over just now, an idea flashed in her mind. She actually remembered who they had plotted against in the previous life. It was Chu Luchen. Yes, Chu Liuchen's body was the weakest, and he almost couldn't stand some overbearing medicine. The medicine to invigorate blood in the food was very overbearing. As long as one was injured, it was easy to bleed. However, if one was not injured, he couldn't stand it either, just like Chu Luchen. In the previous life, no one knew whether Chu Luchen escaped or because his body was as good as it was now, so the medicine had no effect on him. But one thing was certain. In the previous life, they had schemed against Chu Luchen. Only Chu Luchen was the most suitable. The medicine, which was not a big deal to others, might be fatal to him. These people are really despicable. "Help me lie down and have a rest," Xiao Wanru said. Yujie and Chu Lu looked at each other. Although they were puzzled, they still helped her lie down and covered her with the cloak. "Someone should come over later. You can tell them that something happened to me. They said that I was lying in bed without any movement and couldn't be woken up." Xiao Wanru narrowed her long eyes and said coldly. "Your Highness, if an imperial physician is sent here, he will find out," Chu Lu said. "No, I'm not in good health, so it's normal for me to faint," Xiao Wanru said. The so-called faint was basically the performance of people who were in a poor state. In this state, they might not be woken up no matter how hard they tried. In addition, she was already injured, and it was very likely that something happened to her when she was out of breath and weak. Xiao Wanru's current situation was very bad, which was also the reason why the two servant girls were worried before. They were afraid that something would happen to her when she fell asleep. She glanced sideways at the food on the table that had not been cleaned up and said, "When the Empress Dowager comes back, Yujie, you go to see her and tell her that I couldn't be woken up no matter what. Since these people wanted to use her life as a stepping stone, then they should make it bigger, bigger. Your Highness, I understand. When Rui and Great Elder Princess comes back later, shall we tell her the truth first?" Yujie nodded and said, "There's no need to tell Grandma the truth. Grandma is straightforward, and it's easy to give herself away if we tell her the truth. It's better to pretend that she doesn't know anything." Xiao Wanru shook her head. Given Grandma's character, even if she controlled it well, it was inevitable that there would be some differences. The best way was to pretend that she didn't know anything, so that all her reactions were true. And it would be more believable. But if Rui and Great Elder Princess comes back and wants to see you, what should we do? Chu Lu had different doubts. She was afraid that Rui and Great Elder Princess would come to see the princess. If the princess was fine at that time, it would be unreasonable for the Empress Dowager to be in trouble soon. Their expressions of apprehension seemed unreal. They dared to say it in front of the Empress Dowager. Why didn't Rui and Great Elder Princess, who was the princess's biological grandmother? If Grandma comes early, you will make a scene at that time. If Grandma comes with the Empress Dowager, you will go directly to the tent in the middle to find the Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and came up with an idea. Under normal circumstances, of course, Rui and Great Elder Princess came with the Empress Dowager. Rui and Great Elder Princess and the Empress Dowager were sisters-in-law, and they had a good relationship. In addition, she had said that she would go back before, so it was impossible for Rui and Great Elder Princess to come to see her early. But it didn't mean that it was impossible. Xiao Wanru thought of two ideas. No matter which one it would eventually be brought to the Empress Dowager. However, one was caused by the people of Prince Chen's mansion, while the other was caused by Rui and Great Elder Princess. Xiao Wanru didn't want to involve Rui and Great Elder Princess in it, so she could only hope that Rui and Great Elder Princess would come later. Of course, those who plotted behind the scenes probably didn't want to involve Rui and Great Elder Princess in it. Compared with Rui and Great Elder Princess, the people of Prince Chen's mansion would be more emotional and it would be easier to attract the attention of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. After giving a few more detailed instructions to Yu Jie and Chu Lu, Xiao Wanru closed her eyes to rest. In a daze, she seemed to fall asleep, but she didn't seem to fall asleep. Rui and Great Elder Princess did want to come first. She was really worried about Xiao Wanru. After being reminded by the Empress, she felt that she should send someone to see if Xiao Wanru had eaten. After telling her to eat well, she was still worried. The banquet was very lively. Every gift given to the Empress Dowager was very spirited, but Rui and Great Elder Princess was really not in the mood to appreciate it, because she was afraid of her granddaughter's health. When all the gifts were given and everyone was almost finished, she took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth and was about to get up. "Where are you going?" Rui and Great Elder Princess, who was sitting beside her, asked in a low voice when she saw that she was about to get up. Their table was full of princesses, and it was close to the Empress Dowager's table. Chapter 1106. Mother, summon the imperial physician first. The Empress reminded her. The Empress Dowager nodded, asked someone to summon the imperial physician, and led them to the small tent. When they arrived at the tent, they saw Rui and Great Elder Princess sitting on the couch in a panic, holding Xiao Wanru's hand on the bed with tears streaming down her face. The Empress Dowager's body swayed, and she stood still with the help of a palace maid. She took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, "How is Princess Chen?" Empress Dowager. Rui and Great Elder Princess was helped up by Nanny Gao. She reluctantly bowed to the Empress Dowager and cried uncontrollably again. "What's wrong with Princess Chen?" The Empress Dowager had no time to care about Rui and Great Elder Princess. She hurried to the bed and saw Xiao Wanru lying motionless on the bed with a pale face. She was so shocked that she almost fell down. Her grandson asked her to take care of the princess for him, but she died at her birthday banquet. How could she explain it to her grandson? What the hell is going on? After calming down, the Empress Dowager turned to Yu Jie and Chu Lu, who were kneeling on the ground. They were the two maids who served Xiao Wanru, and the Empress Dowager had seen them before. Nanny Wei reached out to help the Empress Dowager sit down in a chair on one side. The Empress sat down in another chair, and the rest of the concubines and princesses crowded at the entrance of the tent. Everyone looked inside nervously. Although the situation was not very good when Princess Chen sent the congratulatory gift, she did not suddenly disappear. How could a good person disappear all of a sudden? Everyone had a relationship with the royal family, so it was easy to involve it in murder. Someone had tried to assassinate Princess Chen before. In order to assassinate Princess Chen, they even made such a big noise. Princess Chen survived the disaster last time, but it did not mean that she would survive the disaster this time. They looked at each other, and all the meanings were expressed without words. Everything was fine just now. How could such a thing happen? It must be because you two servant girls didn't take good care of them. Guards, take these two servant girls away and punish them with 20 strokes of the rod. Empress Dowager was really angry. Thinking of her speechless face when her grandson came back and asked her for her, the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Would Chen think that his princess had an accident because she forced herself to send her a congratulatory gift? Thinking that this thing would fall on her, the Empress Dowager was even more annoyed. Empress Dowager, please forgive me. Our princess was fine before. She even got up to eat. After eating, she went back to sleep, and became like this. Yujie cried loudly and kowtowed several times on the ground. Empress Dowager, when Princess Consort fell asleep, she was still fine. This servant has been waiting on her side. After sleeping for so long, she still hasn't woken up. This servant remembered to call Princess Consort, but no matter how Princess Consort called, she didn't wake up. This servant panicked and reported to Empress Dowager. Chu Lu also kowtowed to Empress Dowager twice and cried loudly. The two servant girls kowtowed very hard. Since they were on the mud, they kowtowed loudly and their foreheads immediately turned blue. After eating, she had an accident. Rui, and great elder princess didn't care that Empress Dowager was here at this time and asked anxiously. At present, she only saw her granddaughter lying there with a pale face without a trace of blood, so she was flustered. Yes, our princess didn't want to use it at first. Great elder princess sent someone over, so our princess used a little more, but, why did she fall asleep and not get up? Yujie explained while crying. Xiao Wanru was lying there extremely calmly on the bed. Her pale face was without a trace of blood, but her expression was extremely calm. Under the cloak, it could be seen that her hands were folded in front of her chest in a neat manner, as if she had fallen asleep normally. Eating? Is it in the meal? Rui and great elder princess's smile looked more uncomfortable than crying. She looked around in panic as if she was looking for something. Finally, she saw the food basket in the corner of the tent and said, check what's in it. Is there anything else in it? Empress Dowager, great elder princess, when there were only two of us, a eunuch from the kitchen came to take the food basket, but we didn't let him take it. It was obviously not him who sent the lunch before. Why did he change in such a short time? Yujie said. If great elder princess hadn't specially asked us to have more lunch today, our princess wouldn't have. Chu Lu also cried and said. I was reminded by the empress, so I asked him to make such a trip. Rui and great elder princess murmured almost to herself subconsciously. The Empress Dowager was calmer than her. At this time, she had already sorted out her thoughts and her eyes fell on the Empress's face. Your Majesty, it was your servant who asked the Imperial Kitchen to prepare lunch for Princess Chen, right? Originally, it was the Empress Dowager's idea, and she also intended to ask someone to do it. It happened that the Empress's servant was going to the kitchen to check on the banquet, so the Empress took over this matter. She didn't think it was a big deal before, but now it was obvious that something had happened to the meal and Rui and great elder princess's words made everyone feel that there seemed to be something wrong. Was it really the Empress's doing? If it was the Empress's doing, it could be explained. It was said that the assassination of Princess Chen had not been investigated yet, but there were only a few people who wanted to deal with Princess Chen. It was very likely that the Empress and Prince Zhou did it. Now that the first plan failed, they came up with a second plan, and they even wanted to kill Princess Chen. The Empress had always flaunted her gentleness and kindness on the surface, but in fact, she had a fierce heart and was not really kind. It was very likely that she would do such a thing to Princess Chen. What happened in the palace was most likely to be involved in the Empress. Mother, I really asked someone to order lunch for Princess Chen according to your instructions. Seeing that the Empress Dowager suspected her, the Empress was angry and resentful, but she had to stand up and explain. The eunuch who sent the food and the eunuch who came to pick it up were not the same person. Does the Empress know that? The Empress Dowager said with a cold face and a stern voice. When the imperial physician came, she would definitely ask the imperial physician to investigate the matter of the meal first. Everything in the palace had its own rules. It wasn't something that anyone could take over if they wanted to. Mother, I really don't know such a thing, and I don't know why the imperial kitchen sent different eunuchs. Mother, I will investigate it now, and I will not let them off easily after I find out. The Empress was eager to clear herself and hurriedly expressed her position. Punish a few eunuchs? Something happened to Princess Chen, but only 2 eunuchs were punished. Your Majesty, is it that Princess Chen doesn't pay enough attention to it, or that Prince Chen doesn't pay enough attention to it? Will Prince Chen also get into trouble because of this kind of groundless thing next time? At that time, you will also dismiss this matter by saying that you will not let them off easily. The Empress Dowager was angry and anxious. She slapped the table hard and said. In the crowd the princesses and were all silent, lowered their heads, and did not dare to say a word. The Empress Dowager and the Empress had a dispute, and they did not dare to say anything. At that time, they might even lose their lives. Many people secretly thought that this matter was really serious. It was said that Prince Chen, who was going to the capital city soon, would make trouble at that time. It was not because Prince Chen treated Princess Chen very well, but because of Prince Chen's temperament. On the surface, Prince Chen seemed to be graceful and gentle, but in fact, he was an unforgiving and domineering person. If he was really provoked, it was really hard to guess what would happen next. He was not a person who was willing to suffer losses, even if the opponent was his eldest brother or second brother. Mother, I will definitely find out the truth, and I will definitely find out who is behind it. I will definitely give Princess Chen an explanation. The Empress was also angry and bitter. This matter inexplicably became related to her, but she did not do anything. She just asked someone to give an order and kindly asked more. Now it was her fault. If she had known it earlier, she would not have kindly asked Rui, an great elder princess at that time. Now it sounded that it was all her fault. Empress Dowager, I know that eunuch. I have seen both the one who gave him and the one who took him later. We paid special attention to him and remembered it. Yujie wiped her red eyes and said. We can both recognize him. Chu Lu also said. Take one of them to the imperial kitchen to recognize him. The Empress Dowager said coldly. She had already made a decision in her heart. Xiao Wanru's accident was too unexpected, but it was not Chu Liuchen's accident after all. Although the Empress Dowager looked at the Empress with gloomy eyes, she was still rational. Come on, take one of them down to recognize him. The Empress replied loudly. It's not necessary. My servant can take him there. The Empress Dowager said to the servant of the Palace of Benevolent Peace. A eunuch came over and took Chu Lu away. The Empress was almost slapped in the face in public. A trace of annoyance flashed in her eyes, but she could not say anything. The Empress Dowager did this to prevent her from secretly playing tricks. Speaking of this matter, the Empress was both aggrieved and angry. She was inexplicably involved in this matter. The Empress Dowager had wanted to ease the relationship with Xiao Wanru so that the Emperor and the Empress Dowager would not suspect her. Now she was suspected of doing something to Xiao Wanru. She was so upset that she almost lost control. The imperial physician came in a hurry. He first bowed to the Empress Dowager and the Empress, and then was taken to a corner to check the food that had been eaten. The imperial physician first tested the poison with a silver needle and found that there was no reaction. Then he carefully checked it. When he found out the truth, his face changed dramatically. How is it? The Empress Dowager asked. Empress Dowager, the food has been drugged with blood circulation medicine. Princess Chen still has wounds on her body. If such medicine is used, will. The imperial physician stammered. He only heard that something had happened to Princess Chen, but he did not know what had happened. But looking at the current situation, it should be that Princess Chen's wounds had burst and she had bled to death. Zhuozhua. Rui, and great elder princess let out a cry. Her body went limp and she fainted. Nanny Gao reached out to hold Rui, and great elder princess, and shouted anxiously, "Great elder princess, great elder princess." What happened? A cold voice suddenly came from the door, which made the empress, who was about to speak, feel a chill on her back. Chapter 1107. Why did Chu Luchen come back? Didn't they say that he was still a distance away from the capital and it was impossible for him to come back? Chu Luchen, who was standing at the door, looked travel-worn. He was wearing a light-colored brocade robe, which was not as neat and tidy as usual. His handsome face showed some tiredness. His skin was almost pale and transparent, and his lips were slightly red, which made him look more indifferent than others. Right now, his eyes were filled with malice. His ghastly gaze was like a ghastly prison, forcing the empress, who had turned around, to take a step back. She instinctively covered her chest, and her heart suddenly beat wildly. Chu Luchen had always been ruthless when he fell out with the empress. One moment, he was sunny, and the next moment, he became cold and ruthless. But at least in front of the empress, he was basically very gentle. At this moment, he inexplicably made people feel that he was gloomy and scary, which was a side that the empress had never seen before. Not only the empress, but also all the princesses and concubines unconsciously stepped back and carefully avoided Prince Chen's gaze. They only felt that when such a gaze fell on them, it made them feel suffocated as if they were bloodthirsty. Only the Empress Dowager stood up in surprise. "Chen, you're back." The news from the emperor said that Chu Luchen could not make it to the Empress Dowager's birthday this time, which made the Empress Dowager feel very sorry. Now seeing Chu Luchen appear in front of her, she was surprised and happy, but immediately felt inexplicably guilty. It was Prince Chen who was lying on the bed, and something had just happened. She hurriedly took a few steps forward, trying to stop him from looking inside. "How can I not care about my grandmother's birthday? I specially rushed to the capital. I just went to see my uncle and handed over the task, and then I came to visit my grandmother," Chu Luchen said, and his cold eyes fell on the Empress Dowager, and his eyes became slightly warm. After that, he lifted his robe and knelt down to the Empress Dowager, wishing his grandmother happiness as vast as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain, and good luck every year in the world. Good luck all over the world. The Empress Dowager excitedly helped Chu Luchen up. Looking at his handsome face, her eyes turned red, and she took his hand and said, "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Imperial Grandmother, if I don't come back, will I not be able to see Zhuozhua for the last time?" Chu Liuchen's face suddenly became cold again, and there was a black mist at the bottom of his eyes. His eyes, which were clear just now, immediately became gloomy as if he could see the bottomless hell. The concubines that had just caught their breath immediately lowered their heads again, not daring to look at his extremely handsome face. Men could also be handsome like this, but this handsomeness was not refined and gentle. It carried a dark and bloodthirsty aura, as if it could destroy everyone here in an instant. Prince Chen, Princess Chen, Rui and Great Elder Princess also woke up from the shock. She was not frightened by Chu Luchen, but felt very wronged and angry. She took a step forward, walked up to Chu Luchen, and said angrily, "Prince Chen, what did you promise me? You said that you would take good care of Zhuozhua, but you took care of her like this." Rui, and Great Elder Princess, was so angry and annoyed that she almost couldn't breathe. Chu Luchen put down the Empress Dowager's hand, bowed deeply to Rui, and Great Elder Princess, and then raised his head. "Great Elder Princess, don't worry. I will definitely find the murderer who wants to assassinate Princess Chen." "Find the murderer? What's the use of finding a murderer? Someone has poisoned the food just now and killed Zhuozhua." Rui, and Great Elder Princess, burst into tears. Chu Luchen tightly pursed his lips, and there seemed to be a storm at the bottom of his eyes. After a long time, he slowly asked, "Who did it?" He said that it was a servant of the empress who went to the imperial kitchen. Rui and great elder princess felt very distressed and said while crying, "Zhuozhuo has a hard life. She lost her parents when she was a child and lived outside. Even if she was recognized by her family, there was no one who really loved her. It was not easy for her to marry you, and she thought that the bitterness would be over and the sweetness would come, but she didn't expect that she would end up like this. If she had known this earlier, she would not have married at that time. At least she could have lived a peaceful life. She was a girl, and she was an unmarried girl. Who would have such a great hatred and want to kill her? But she died like this in the imperial palace. Everyone knew that this matter had to be caused by Prince Chen. There must be someone who wanted to deal with Prince Chen, so he would deal with Princess Chen first. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was her marriage to Prince Chen that caused her to end up like this. Some soft-hearted people thought that Princess Chen did have a hard life. Everyone had heard about what had happened in Marquis Xing's mansion. It was true that Marquis Xing's mansion was not kind to Princess Chen. Now old madam went to cultivate in seclusion. Although she did not say it clearly, well-informed people knew that old madam was not kind, so something happened. Otherwise, why did old madam go to cultivate in seclusion instead of enjoying life in her own mansion? Grandaunt, don't worry. I will definitely find out the truth. Chu Luqian said, and his eyes fell on Xiao Wanru, who was lying on the bed inside. Xiao Wanru, who was lying motionless on the imperial consort couch, was silent. Imperial grandmother, you go back with grandaunt first. Leave the imperial physician here. Chu Luqian murmured. Although he said it to Empress Dowager and Rui and great elder princess, his eyes still fell straight on the person lying inside. Chen, don't be too sad. Empress Dowager comforted. She was really worried about Chu Liuchen's health. Imperial grandmother, don't worry. I'm fine. Chu Luqian said, still looking inside. Empress Dowager still wanted to say something, but she didn't know where to start. She sighed helplessly and left with everyone. Rui and great elder princess didn't want to leave at first, but seeing Chu Luqian like this, she was angry but helpless. She could only walk out while crying. When she walked to the door of the tent, she suddenly said, "Let the imperial physician have a look." Why did Chu Luqian fall asleep? Maybe he could be saved. After saying this, she supported Gao Momo and followed behind the crowd to leave. Empress Dowager also heard this. She looked back in astonishment and saw Rui and great elder princess sobbing. She originally wanted to say something, but at this time, she felt that she couldn't get anything out of her even if she asked, so she could only shake her head. Rui and great elder princess might also be dizzy from crying. How could she save a dead person? She only had one granddaughter, and she used to love her granddaughter the most. At this time, she probably felt that her granddaughter still had a breath in her heart. It was good for the imperial physician to have a look. Empress Dowager also took Rui and great elder princess's words seriously. She completely forgot that Rui and great elder princess was the only one who had met Xiao Wanru when they came in just now. Only she knew that Xiao Wanru was still alive even though she was lying there silently. The Empress, and other princesses all had the same idea as Empress Dowager. They all thought that Rui and great elder princess was very depressed. He had suffered such a huge blow that his mind was clouded by phlegm, and he had lost his mind when he spoke. How could a dead person be saved? No one cared about what Rui and great elder princess said. The Empress didn't even raise her head and just lowered her head worriedly. This matter was already very difficult to handle, and now it was even more difficult to handle. This matter actually involved her. When Chu Luqian was not here, it was difficult for her to get away. Now that Chu Luqian was back, it was even more difficult for her to deal with it. Infanta Yuan, then, who was beside Rui and great elder princess, was in a good mood. She deliberately looked at the gauze curtain hanging behind her and raised the corners of her mouth silently. It was great that Xiao Wanru was dead. It was better for a girl like her to die. No matter how much Prince Chen doted on her, she was just a dead person. How could she be compared with her precious life? Xiao Wanru's life was the most precious. How could Xiao Wanru's life be compared with hers? Xiao Wanru had humiliated her before. Grandma also asked her to flatter Xiao Wanru and make friends with her. Now, Xiao Wanru was dead. It was really great. They had different thoughts, but they all looked very serious on the surface. The Empress Dowager returned to the big tent and sat down, without a smile on her face. The Empress was also worried. If the two of them didn't speak, no one else dared to speak. In the big tent, only Rui and Great Elder Princess sobbed from time to time. In the small tent, the imperial physician reached out to carefully feel Xiao Wanru's pulse. When he felt the faint warmth in his hand, the imperial physician relaxed and looked at Princess Chen lying on the bed in astonishment. She was not dead. He came late. When he came in, he saw Princess Chen lying there motionless and Rui and Great Elder Princess crying like that, so he thought that Princess Chen was dead. Now Prince Chen asked him to feel her pulse, which scared the imperial physician a lot. How could he feel her pulse when she was dead? However, in front of the gloomy Prince Chen, he didn't dare to refuse, so he reached out his hand tremblingly. Now he took a deep breath and felt alive. Fortunately, Princess Chen was not dead and Prince Chen was not really crazy. He was afraid that Princess Chen on the bed had already stopped breathing. Prince Chen still asked him to feel her pulse. If he couldn't feel her pulse, he might be killed by this crazy Prince Chen. He calmed down, carefully felt her pulse, and frowned. After a long while, he put down his hand. How is she? Chu Luchen asked in a cold voice, and his eyes fell on the imperial physician coldly. The imperial physician trembled and hurriedly said, Princess Chen should be fine. It was just that she had lost a lot of breath and was very weak. It was a miracle that Princess Chen, who was so weak, could survive such a serious injury. But in addition, there was really no sign of poisoning, and there was no feeling of blood circulation medicine. The imperial physician also felt very strange. Since she was fine, why didn't she wake up? A chill appeared at the bottom of Chu Liuchen's dark bottomless eyes. If you talk nonsense for me, I will kill you. When he spoke, his tone was calm and unhurried. But with his cold eyes, it made people feel palpitated, and they knew that he didn't say it in a moment of anger. The imperial physician originally wanted to tell the truth, but now he was not sure whether what he sensed was true. Could it be that something really happened to Princess Chen, and he couldn't see it? Chapter 1108. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Your Highness, Princess Chen's current condition. I'm afraid it's not very good. The imperial physician carefully replied. I just want to ask when she will wake up. Chu Luchen said coldly, his eyes cold and sharp. The Tai unconsciously raised his head and met the pair of eyes that made people tremble. His lips trembled a few times in panic before he finally replied, reporting to Wang Yi, this lowly official does not know the specifics and can only carefully wait for Wang Fei to wake up. Wait. How dare you make me wait? Okay, I'll wait. If something happens to the princess, you'll be buried with her. Chu Luchen said coldly. His voice was not loud, but the determination in his words could be heard. He was sure that if something really happened to the Princess Chen in front of him, he would definitely be buried with her. The imperial physician was so frightened that his legs went soft and he knelt down. Go out first and wait outside, Chu Luchen said with a sullen face. The imperial physician didn't dare to stay any longer. The entire tent gave him a heavy feeling, as if something terrifying was spilling out of his chest. He staggered up and walked out of the tent. He felt cold all over and looked back at the tent with lingering fear. He could only hope that Chen Wang Fei was fine. Imperial physician, how is Princess Chen? Her Majesty the Empress sent this servant to ask. A young eunuch was not far from the tent. When he saw the imperial physician come out, he trotted to his side and asked in a low voice. He was sent by the Empress to gather information. Princess Chen. The imperial physician shook his head and wiped his cold sweat with a bitter smile. He didn't know what to do at the moment. It depends on when Princess Chen will be fine, otherwise, at this point, the imperial physician shook his head again. He didn't dare to say that he would be fine. Princess Chen hasn't. The little eunuch blinked his eyes and didn't dare to continue. He only pursed his lips at the imperial physician. If it was in the past, the grand physician would have told everything he knew to the person sent by the Empress. But now, he was also out of his wits and didn't have the mood to say anything to the little Taijian. Carrying the medicine box, she frowned and stood not far from the small tent, waiting for Prince Chen to summon her. The little Taijian still wanted to ask something but saw that the head doctor lowered his head and didn't say a word, as if he didn't hear what he said. He knew that the head doctor didn't seem to have the intention to answer his question. He scratched his head and went back to report to the Empress. In fact, he didn't understand these words. Was there still hope for Princess Chen? Or was he still holding on to his last breath? After all the outsiders in the tent left, Xiao Wanru, who was lying on the bed, slowly opened her eyes and saw a pair of cold and angry eyes. Chu Liuchen's handsome face was right above her. Xiao Wanru smiled, moved her stiff hand, grabbed his sleeve, and shook it gently. Xiao Wanru's sleeves were torn open fiercely, and her hands fell down heavily. She frowned and let out a low cry of pain. Are you injured? Chu Liuchen's hand hesitated for a moment, but he still reached over, pulled her hand, and asked coldly, is it on this arm? His words were cold, but he didn't hit her hard. He gently pulled her hand and wanted to roll up her sleeve to see her injury. It's not this arm. I'm a little stiff lying on the bed. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said softly. She reached out to pull his sleeve again and said with a little shyness, don't be angry. I didn't do it on purpose. It was the best thing to do in that situation. Otherwise, someone would definitely ask about it later. I'll deal with it later. It has nothing to do with you. Chu Liuchen said coldly with his eyes full of coldness. He looked at Xiao Wanru coldly and remained unmoved. But, in that case, even the emperor and the empress would be alarmed. Xiao Wanru blamed him aggrievedly with her eyes turning red. If I didn't do it at that time, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to pass the test. I'm also afraid that you will be suspected. My injury is the best proof that it has nothing to do with you. Chu Liuchen's eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face. Looking at her pale little face, he felt distressed and wanted to scold her fiercely. However, when he saw her red eyes and pale face, he had already collapsed. There was no longer the anger he had felt when he got the news and came all the way here. He sighed heavily in the bottom of his heart and carefully held her in his arms. His eyes were still fierce where Xiao Wanru couldn't see. Remember, there won't be a next time. There won't be a next time. Xiao Wanru quickly promised. It's good that you remember it. If there is a next time, I can't guarantee what I will do. Chu Liuchen warned her. If he hadn't seen Xiao Wanru's eyelids move slightly and then lie down obediently when he entered the door, he would have thought that something had really happened. Fortunately, she was fine. He wanted to hold her tightly, but he was afraid of touching her wound, so he could only hold her carefully. At this moment, his heart was at ease again, as if something most precious was still in his heart. For him, she had long been the most precious thing in the world, but this time she fell into such a dangerous situation. Although he took advantage of the situation, he didn't want to see her get hurt again because of him, even if she did it on purpose. It was a fact that she got hurt. She was the best cover for him. He married her to protect her, but he didn't expect that she would protect him this time. This was the last time, and there would be no next time. In fact, he could become stronger and make a more thorough arrangement, so that she would never get hurt again. It was he who didn't protect her well. He pressed her against his chest with a little force. His heart, which had not been settled for a while, was finally at ease. Then he put her down, looked down at her soft little face and asked, what did Mingxiu Nun say? Mingxiu Nun said that she was fine and just needed to recuperate first. Her body is indeed a little weak, but it's just a little weak. Otherwise, why would she come to send a congratulatory gift to Imperial Grandmother? Xiao Wanru leaned against his chest and replied softly. What's going on today? Chu Luqian nodded and asked again. Today's incident happened suddenly, and he hadn't received the news yet. He only knew what happened to Xiao Wanru during this period of time, but he really didn't know what happened today. If Xiao Wanru hadn't slightly signaled to him when he came in, he almost thought that it was true. At that moment, all the darkness in his heart broke out, and he had a feeling that he wanted to destroy the whole world. Fortunately, she was not really injured. Hearing Chu Liuqian's question, Xiao Wanru told him what had happened today. She couldn't tell him what had happened in the last life, but when she told him what had happened, she could deviate from that direction and carefully lead Chu Luqian to that idea. I see. Go back and have a rest first. After Xiao Wanru finished speaking, Chu Luqian nodded and his eyes became deep. There were some things that happened to coincide with his. Then I'll go back first. Xiao Wanru said. She also knew that it was the best time for her to go back now. After all, this was the imperial palace, and there were many people. If she returned to Prince Chen's mansion, she would not be spied on. I'll send you back. Chu Luqian nodded and carefully put down Xiao Wanru. Then he wrapped her in the cloak, picked her up without thinking, and strode out. Yujie, who was guarding at the door, hurriedly lifted the curtain for them. Go and report to Imperial Grandmother that I will come to congratulate her on her birthday later. Chu Luqian walked out and ordered. Yes, I'll follow your order. Yujie hurriedly answered. At this time, she also breathed a sigh of relief. The prince was back, and the whole prince's mansion had a backbone. Next, the princess didn't need to rush ahead. Seeing the prince leave with the princess in his arms, Yujie turned and went to the big tent in the middle. The atmosphere in the tent was very dull. The Empress Dowager was still sitting there with a sullen face, and the Empress didn't dare to speak. She just got the news that Princess Qin seemed to be still alive, but so what? Even the imperial physician had been moved out of the tent. It could be seen that it was not good. She didn't know to what extent this matter would implicate her and how she should deal with it. She kept thinking in her heart and twisted the handkerchief in her hand into a ball. Rui, and great elder princess, had stopped crying. She kept wiping her tears with red eyes, and her eyes were blank. Since these people didn't say anything, the others didn't dare to say anything. Everyone was in a daze. Empress Dowager, Princess Chen's servant girl is here. A eunuch came in and reported softly. Let her come in and reply. The Empress Dowager calmed down and said in a deep voice. Yujie was brought in. After kneeling down and kowtowing to the Empress Dowager, she said, Empress Dowager, our prince took the princess back to his mansion first. He said that he would come to congratulate you on your birthday later. How is your princess? The Empress Dowager asked. I don't know. Yujie's eyes turned red. Our prince left with the princess in his arms and asked the imperial physician to go with them. Her words reminded the Empress Dowager. She turned her head and ordered, send a few more imperial physicians to cure Princess Chen. In fact, in the Empress Dowager's heart, Xiao Wanru had already died. But at this time, even for the sake of Chu Luqian, she had to send a few more imperial physicians there. What she was most afraid of was that her grandson would suffer a great blow. It was not easy for her grandson to recover. Now he suffered such a big blow at this time. Would he be unable to survive? Before, the Empress Dowager had wanted to send a few concubines to Prince Chen's mansion, but now she no longer had this kind of idea. She had to admit that her grandson really cared about Xiao Wanru. It was not a temporary feeling. For so many years, only such a woman had entered his heart. For her mourning, he had waited for her for 3 years. They had just been married for a short time, but they were separated forever. Even ordinary people couldn't cope with such a great sorrow, not to mention that her grandson had just recovered. Empress, sit with them and watch the performance for a while. I have a headache, so I'll go back first. At this time, the Empress Dowager was not in the mood to congratulate the Empress. After thinking for a while, she stood up and said. Holding the shoulder of an old nanny, the people of the Palace of Benevolent Peace left in an orderly manner, leaving the Empress Dowager and a group of noble ladies dumbfounded as they watched the Duke of Longevity leave. The Duke of Longevity had left, and Princess Chen's life and death were unknown. Who was still in the mood to be happy now? Who dared to be happy? Chapter 1109. When Xiao Wanru returned to Prince Chen's mansion, she fell asleep. Chu Liuchen's hands were very steady. He held her all the way, and it was so steady that she felt that she was still in bed. Chu Liuchen's breath also calmed her heart. The longing during this period also fell into her heart, and she slowly fell asleep. Although she had pretended that something had happened and had been lying straight, in fact, she had not fallen asleep. Her spirit was also highly concentrated. Listening to the words of the people in the tent, at this moment, she involuntarily relaxed and entered a state of rest. Chu Luchen still entered Prince Chen's mansion from the side door. A palace maid at the side door saw him and wanted to go forward excitedly, but she was stopped by his cold eyes. Then she carefully retreated. When she was out of Chu Liuchen's sight, she picked up the corner of her dress and ran away. She had to tell the Empress that Prince Chen was back. Prince Chen came back at this time. The Empress had been looking forward to His Highness's return every day. Now it was great. Chu Luchen returned to the inner courtyard with Xiao Wanru in his arms and carefully put her on the bed. Looking at her pale little face, his heart was pierced fiercely. Then he lowered his head and gently kissed her on the face. When he raised his head, his face had become cold, as if the tenderness just now was just a hallucination. He reached out to take a quilt from the side for Xiao Wanru and carefully covered her with it, for fear that she would be woken up and not sleep well. After looking at her in a daze, he stood up and walked out of the door, where Qing Yu was waiting outside. What did Mingqiu Nun say? Chu Luchen asked. Mingqiu Nun said that it's not a big deal. She just needs to rest well. Qing Yu did not dare to hide it and immediately repeated Mingqiu Nun's words. Chu Luchen was relieved and nodded. The princess is asleep inside. Serve her well here. Yes, I know. Qing Yu answered. Yu Jie and Chu Le had gone with the princess. Now only the princess came back. Qing Yu was also very nervous, but she did not dare to ask more. Chu Luchen strode out and entered the imperial palace from the side door. After looking around, he went directly to the imperial study where the emperor was. In the imperial study, the emperor had already received the news. When he heard that he had come, he hurriedly asked someone to call him in. Prime Minister Zhang and Prime Minister Wen, who had been discussing inside, came out. On the way, they saw Chu Luchen, who was travel-worn, and saluted together. Greetings, Your Highness. Prime Ministers, you are too polite. Chu Luchen raised his hand slightly and said with gentle eyes. At this time, he was still the gentle and handsome Prince Chen in the past. But he was a little different from the past. His imposing manner was more imposing than before. It was the imposing manner of two important ministers. This imposing manner was even more convincing than that of Prince of Zhou, the legitimate son of the Empress. Seeing Chu Luchen going in, Wen Xiang and Zhang Xiang looked at each other, and a trace of worry flashed across their eyes. Prince Chen was different from before. He seemed to be a little more determined, like a sword out of the sheath, which was inexplicably frightening. This Prince Chen had always been outside of power. What did it mean now? The two prime ministers had a lot on their minds and felt uneasy. Chu Luchen entered the imperial study. There was no one else in the imperial study except the emperor and eunuch Durong. Greetings, uncle. Chu Luchen strode in and knelt down to salute the emperor. The emperor came out from behind the desk excitedly and said, "Don't. Get up quickly." Chu Luchen did not stand up. He still knelt and said, "Uncle, please help me." The emperor frowned and said, "Get up first and talk." Uncle, on this trip, this son was purposely delayed several times on the way back. This son's carriage also had an accident and almost flipped over. In order to hurry to the capital to congratulate Imperial Grandmother, this son abandoned the carriage and rode into the capital. I didn't think that this son's Wang Fei would almost lose her life. Is the security of the Imperial City really that bad? Even a powerless woman can't be tolerated. Chu Liuchen's face changed, but he still did not get up. The Emperor's face became very ugly. He stretched out his hand and wanted to pull Chu Liuchen up, but when he saw the persistence in Chu Liuchen's eyes, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes and put down his hand. Get up first. I know about it. Uncle, do you really know about it? Chu Liuchen didn't hesitate this time. He stood up and stared at the Emperor with an indescribable sadness in his eyes. Uncle, I know that my life was picked up by you, and I can't be compared with others. It's good that I can live well. In fact, I don't need to cure my body, and I shouldn't marry a wife. If I didn't marry a wife, my princess wouldn't have almost died because of the rebellion. The behavior of the men in black that night and the use of military crossbows was indeed a rebellion in a strict sense. The Emperor took a step back, and his face suddenly turned pale. His lips trembled twice, and he said with difficulty, Chen, why shouldn't you live? You have a noble bloodline. Why can't you live? I'm sorry for you. Uncle, why do you say this? Before I met my princess, I actually don't want to live too long, so as not to disturb others. It's a big crime for me to live. How can I let this big crime implicate Imperial Grandmother and Uncle? It's just that I met the princess, and I want to stay with her wholeheartedly. But even so, can't I? Chu Liuchen said calmly, and his eyes fell on the Emperor. His calmness seemed to be talking about other people's affairs, and the Emperor's heart was pulled hard and pulled down hard. What was Chu Liuchen's previous situation? Of course, he was clear that he had abandoned himself to despair and didn't care about his life. If it weren't for Princess Chen at present, he might not even care about his life. What did he do wrong? In fact, he didn't do anything wrong at all. He was the most innocent one. Fetal poison. He had suffered a lot before he was born. After he was born, he had been wandering on the edge of life. When he was young, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly in front of him, for fear that he would catch a cold. It was not easy for him to grow up, and now he had the desire to live. All these were really hard to come by. Don't worry, I will protect you, protect your mansion. Looking at Chu Liuchen's calm eyes, the Emperor took a deep breath. He was afraid to see Chu Liuchen's feeling as if nothing could enter his heart. This kind of calmness, as if everything was dead and he could not care about anything, represented his hopelessness. Uncle, I just want to live well with the princess. Chu Liuchen said in a low voice, and there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes. The Emperor could see clearly that only when he mentioned Princess Chen, Chu Liuchen's mood fluctuated and he had a little feeling. Uncle, Imperial Ancestor. Those people are not at ease on Mother's birthday. How could they make such a thing in the palace? This time it's my princess. What about next time? Will it be my grandmother or someone else? I don't have many relatives, and I only hope that the relatives I care about can live safe and sound. Chu Liuchen said again. After that, he bowed to the Emperor. Uncle, I'm going to see Imperial Grandmother. What happened to Princess Consort just now has frightened Imperial Grandmother. I'm afraid that Imperial Grandmother is not in the mood to watch the performance at this time. But this is also good. There are many people entering the palace today. With so many people, it will be difficult to investigate if something happens. It is impossible to investigate the family of a fourth-level official. The palace is really not safe. After that, he turned and walked out. Wait a minute. The Emperor's voice came from behind. Chu Liuchen turned back. How is your body? Did you hurt yourself on the way back to the capital city? The Emperor took 2 steps forward and asked with concern. Uncle, don't worry. I am really well. I am a little tired after the long journey, but I can still hold on. Chu Luchen turned back and answered. The emperor's eyes fell on his face, and his handsome face showed a little fatigue. It could be seen that he was really tired. He thought that he could not make it in time, but now he saw him here. He must have rushed through the night and did not stop along the way. Is your body really okay? The emperor asked again. Uncle, don't worry. It's really nothing serious. I should be fine after an early sleep at night. Chu Luchen replied. The emperor looked at him carefully again and checked his face. Although his face was still as pale as before, and his lips were lighter than ordinary people, he was still energetic. The emperor felt relieved. It seemed that Chu Liuchen's body was really well. He could withstand such a long journey, and he was a little stronger than ordinary people. Since your body can stand it, you can go to the court tomorrow. The emperor seemed to have made a major decision, so he waved his hand and said. I'm leaving. Chu Luchen nodded and left. When he came out of the imperial study, he looked back at the tall and wide door of the hall, and his eyes became more and more calm. He was not surprised by what the emperor said just now, because this was what he originally wanted to express. His body had recovered and he was no longer a useless prince. His actions of rushing the army was more truthful than what the imperial physician had said. Facts spoke louder than words. After coming out of the imperial study, Chu Luchen went to the Empress Dowager's Tsikong Palace, but he did not see the Empress Dowager. He said that the Empress Dowager was not feeling well, so he went to bed. Chu Luchen knelt down outside the Empress Dowager's palace, respectfully kowtowed 3 times inside, and then got up and went back. When he returned to Prince Chen's mansion, Xiao Wanru had not woken up yet. After washing up, Chu Luchen also went to bed, carefully holding the slender figure in his arms, and also closed his eyes. He was really tired all the way. Xiao Wanru was weak due to lack of qi, and Chu Luchen was tired. They slept until the night. After being woken up by Nanny Yu and Nanny Zheng, they took a little rest. Chu Luchen personally changed the dressing for Xiao Wanru. When he saw her wound, his face darkened again, and Xiao Wanru coaxed him for a while. After that, he fell asleep early. Prince Chen's mansion was peaceful, but the imperial palace was not peaceful. The Empress Dowager was ill. Chapter 11:10. Qianqian. The latest chapter on medical skills of the Crown Princess was updated as soon as possible. The Empress Dowager was found to be ill in the evening. Nanny Wei hurriedly went to find an imperial physician and reported it to Fengyi Palace. However, the chief steward of Fengyi Palace said that the Empress had gone to the Emperor's imperial study. Nanny Wei thought about it and could only go to the imperial study. As soon as she arrived at the door of the imperial study, she heard the Emperor's angry rebuke. Several eunuchs stood at the door with their heads lowered, trembling. When they saw her coming, they immediately winked at her. Nanny Wei did not dare to go in again and stood aside with the eunuchs. The voice inside was very loud, and she could hear the Emperor's anger. What a good Empress! What a good Empress! What a good Empress! What a good Empress! What's the use of an Empress like you? Good. Very good. Does the Empress really think that the imperial harem is under your control? The imperial kitchen intervenes. Prince Chen, the Emperor's voice could not be heard clearly. Nanny Wei's face turned pale and she stepped back cautiously. She did not dare to listen to this kind of words. It was better to step back a little. The voice inside became soft. Maybe she had stepped back far enough. She could only vaguely hear the Emperor's angry rebuke, and then the Empress's low whimper. Nanny Wei stepped back a few more steps, and this time she almost retreated to the corner of the wall. After a long time, Nanny Wei's feet were numb. Then she saw several palace maids supporting the Empress to leave. The Empress was crying and wiping her tears. She was unsteady on her feet. If it weren't for the maids supporting her, she might not even be able to stand. As the Empress of the 6S, she left the imperial study in tears like an ordinary woman. Nanny Wei did not dare to go forward. She carefully shrank to one side, for fear that someone would find her here. She regretted coming at this time. She should have waited to come back. After waiting for a while, she saw Durong holding the emperor's decree and going to the imperial harem, followed by several eunuchs. Was he going to announce the decree? Nanny Wei felt more and more uncomfortable. After waiting for a while, she walked to the door of the imperial study with fear and trepidation. She said to the eunuch standing outside the door, "Can you help me report that the Empress Dowager is ill?" Hearing that the Empress Dowager was sick, the little eunuch didn't dare to delay and hurriedly went to report. After a while, he let her in. It was not the first time for Nanny Wei to come to the imperial study. In the past, the imperial study was peaceful, and the emperor's attitude was also very good. Especially because she was the Empress Dowager's servant, the emperor also treated her very well. But at this time, she felt uneasy. Hearing that the Empress Dowager's health wasn't good, the emperor told her to take good care of the Empress Dowager. He told her to go back first and said that he would come over later. Nanny Wei went back to the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful. Not long after, the emperor came. The imperial physician found that the Empress Dowager was depressed. In addition, she was old and couldn't bear it for a while, so she got sick. The imperial physician asked the Empress Dowager to have a good rest. The emperor and the Empress Dowager sent everyone out. After talking with the Empress Dowager for a while, they left the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful. Although Nanny Wei didn't hear it, she felt uneasy for a while and always felt that something was going to happen. In the court meeting the next day, the news of Prince Chen's return had already spread. When Chu Luchen appeared in front of everyone at the court meeting, they all carefully looked at Prince Chen. They found that Prince Chen was in good spirits, although his complexion was much paler than that of ordinary people. Ordinary people were a little too pale, but on the whole, it was not a big deal. This made many courtiers secretly wonder if it was said that Prince Chen was so weak that he couldn't even walk a few steps. When he was in the palace, he basically had to use a wheelchair to walk. What was happening at this time? Some sharp-witted people felt that it was too coincidental for Prince Chen to appear at this time. What did Prince Chen mean? What did the emperor mean? Everyone secretly guessed in their hearts and inexplicably had a bad feeling. But the next moment, the emperor dropped a large bomb, so that all the courtiers no longer had the mood to think about Prince Chen. The emperor wanted to abolish the empress. The emperor said that he wanted to abolish the empress and asked the courtiers' opinion. Such a big thing actually broke out all of a sudden. Although everyone was secretly suspicious of this matter because of the matter of Princess Chen, no one thought that this matter would really be announced in front of the courtiers. How could the empress of a dynasty be so easily abolished? This was going to cause turmoil in the court. According to the emperor's announcement, Prince Chen was killed in the harem, and it was inextricably linked to the empress. Even all the people who contacted Prince Chen were more or less related to the empress. Prince Chen almost died in the palace yesterday. Fortunately, Prince Chen did not eat those dishes, otherwise she would not be alive at this time. After hearing the emperor's decree, many courtiers stood up and asked the emperor for mercy. They said that although it felt that it was the empress who did it, it was not necessarily the empress. There must be someone who wanted to secretly deal with the empress. Besides the empress, it seemed that this sentence implied concubine Da. After all, only Prince Yu and Prince Shou, who were born by concubine Da, were the most competitive. Some people stood on Prince Shou's side, saying that Prince Shou was the legitimate son of the empress, and the empress had always been steady. This time she was framed, and she must be wronged. It could be said that someone deliberately did it, and whoever benefited from it would be the one who did it. Others stood on Prince Yu's side, saying that Prince Yu was steady and fair, and it was good for concubine Da to be in the harem. Now that the empress had an accident, concubine Da must be uneasy, and this matter had to be considered in the long run. Of course, some courtiers said nothing, just stood aside, frowning and quietly listening to the arguments of other courtiers. Chu Liuzhou's face was cold, and he was full of a murderous aura. It was his mother who was going to be abolished. If he didn't try hard to restrain himself, he almost couldn't help but want to slap those courtiers who said that they should consider in the long run. It was obvious that it was his mother who did it. From yesterday's incident to now, Prince Zhou had also heard about what happened to Princess Chen, and he even wanted to sneak into the palace to meet his mother, but he hadn't seen the Empress yet. At this time, he was at a loss, and he felt annoyed. He gritted his teeth hard to suppress his anger. Chu Luiyue looked much calmer, but he didn't say anything. He stood aside quietly with his head down, listening to the noise of the courtiers. Chu Luqian was also very calm, but he didn't lower his head. He looked at several courtiers who were talking with a bit of coldness in his eyes. Some people wanted to abolish the Empress, and some wanted to postpone it. Everyone quarreled. For a moment, the whole court was noisy. An imperial censor was so excited that he even wanted to admonish the Empress to death. He was so excited that he almost hit the mahogany dragon pillar in the hall. The emperor was so angry that he threw all the memorials in his hand down. For a moment, it was quiet in the hall. It was so quiet that even the sound of breathing could be heard clearly. That's all for today. We'll discuss it tomorrow, the emperor said coldly. After that, he turned around and left the court. Seeing the emperor leave, the people in the hall calmed down at this time. They looked at each other and didn't know how to deal with it for a moment. Since the emperor had proposed it, this matter would definitely be discussed in the court in the future. How did it get to this point? What happened to Princess Chen? Someone wanted to inquire about Princess Chen, but when he saw Prince Chen's cold and handsome eyes glancing over, he couldn't help but shiver and immediately didn't dare to open his mouth. This prince seemed to be in a bad mood. If he was annoyed, he would definitely suffer. Most of the courtiers had seen how favored Prince Chen was in the imperial study, so they didn't dare to come forward at this time. Even the courtiers didn't dare to come forward at this time. Of course, the other courtiers didn't dare to come forward at this time. He could only watch as the prince swaggered off. When they turned to look at Prince Yu and Prince Shou, they found that these two princes had also left. Things in the previous court were in such a mess, but the harem seemed to be calm. The Empress's Fengyi Palace just seemed to be closed. A group of S was ordered not to disturb the Empress Dowager and the Empress, saying that these two concubines were both sick. Both of them were sick in the palace. For a while, no one dared to make more trouble. The atmosphere of the entire inner palace was inexplicably tense. Everyone felt that this time the Empress might really lose power. After being deposed, Prince Shou would not be the legitimate son of the Empress, but the same status as the other princes. Everyone had the same status, and Prince Yu was the eldest son. No matter from which aspect, Prince Yu was the most likely to inherit the throne. Many S didn't go to the Empress to pay their respects, but unconsciously turned to concubine Da. At this time, it would be very beneficial for them to curry favor with concubine Da. It was better to curry favor with concubine Da before she became the Empress. Otherwise, when concubine Da became the Empress or the future Empress Dowager in the future, they would have nothing to do with it. The palace where concubine Da was located immediately became very lively. At this time, Chu Luqian secretly met concubine Lan in the attic where he used to rest. This place was close to Prince Chen's mansion and not far from the back door of Prince Chen's mansion. When Chu Luqian came over, concubine Lan was already waiting for him upstairs. Seeing him coming, concubine Lan looked at him excitedly, and tears immediately fell from her beautiful face. Chu Luqian stood far away and looked at concubine Lan coldly without saying a word. You sit down first and talk. Concubine Lan looked him up and down a few times and found that he was really in good health. He didn't seem to be struggling, so she breathed a sigh of relief and pointed to the chair beside her. Chu Luqian glanced at her indifferently and walked over slowly. He first pulled the chair aside and then sat down. His eyes were cold, and he looked at concubine Lan as if he was looking at a stranger. There was no warmth on his handsome face. Can't you? Concubine Lan's eyes were a little begging. No. Chu Luqian said without hesitation. Chen, you still blame me, don't you? blame me all the time. But what can I do? I can't do anything. Concubine Lan suddenly became excited and said with tears in her eyes. Chapter 11:11. The latest chapter on treating the crown princess as soon as possible. Chu Luchen looked at Concubine Lan very calmly, and his eyes were light. After Concubine Lan finished speaking, he said, Concubine Lan, you don't have to say these things to me. His words made Concubine Lan's excited expression slowly calm down. There was sadness in her beautiful eyes. Chen, you know, the person I don't want to hurt the most in this world is you. As long as you are happy, I am willing to do anything. I just want to protect you. Concubine Lan's face turned red. You're welcome, Your Highness. I have been protected by you, and I almost lost my life. Chu Luchen sat down with a faint smile, straightened his sleeves, and said, Concubine Lan, why do you want to see me? If there is nothing important, we'd better not meet. Maybe there will be some rumors from my uncle. At that time, it will be bad for Concubine Lan. Chen, do you really hate me so much? When I was young, I accompanied you well, didn't I? Concubine Lan said while crying. If Concubine Lan wants to talk about my childhood, forget it. I don't want to talk about the fact that I almost lost my life when I was young. If possible, I'd better never talk about it. Chu Luchen said decisively. How is Princess Chen? Seeing his eyes like this, Concubine Lan still straightened up, calmed her breath, and asked, although she was in great pain. It would be better if Concubine Lan didn't disturb her. Chu Luchen lowered his eyes, and his handsome face was cold. I wanted to protect her, but I didn't know things would develop so fast. Concubine Lan stammered and tried to explain, but was interrupted by Chu Luchen rudely. Concubine Lan, you'd better not say anything. There are always so many difficulties, so many helplessness, and so many opportunities. In fact, Concubine Lan can ignore everything. Maybe your luck will fall by itself. As for my affairs, Concubine Lan, you don't have to worry about them. It doesn't matter if Ben Wang lives or dies. What happens to Ben Wang's princess has nothing to do with you. It's best if there is no relationship between the two of us. Chu Luchen curled his lips, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Concubine Lan, I can't stay here for a long time. I have to go back to the mansion to see my princess. After all, she was seriously injured for me. If I were in the mansion at that time, maybe I would be the one who should die. Chu Luchen stood up, shook his wide sleeves, and said leisurely. After that, he casually cupped his hands to Concubine Lan, turned around, and left. Chen, Concubine Lan shouted, with tears falling down her cheeks. Seeing Chu Luchen stop at the door, she was immediately overjoyed. She suddenly stood up and murmured, Chen, Concubine Lan, I want to tell you that you should stay away from me and Ben Wang from now on. Don't appear around Ben Wang and Ben Wang again. You have done a good deed. You should deal with your own affairs by yourself. Don't let others plot against Ben Wang and Ben Wang. After Chu Luchen finished speaking, he strode away. Concubine Lan staggered and sat down behind him. Suddenly, she picked up a handkerchief to cover her face and cried. Did she regret it? She didn't know. She only knew that she didn't want to see Chu Luchen like this. Concubine Lan, don't be sad. His Highness had no choice. I heard that Prince Chen was seriously injured. Qing Mu, Concubine Lan's personal palace maid, stood out from behind her and comforted her in a low voice. But what can I do? I have no choice. I don't want to be like this. Concubine Lan lay on the back of the chair and cried in a low voice. Concubine Lan, I heard that someone stopped His Highness on his way to the capital city. Something happened to His Highness's carriage, and His Highness almost lost his life. After entering the capital city, Prince Chen almost lost her life. His Highness was distressed, so he spoke to you like this. His Highness has finally recovered, and now others can't tolerate him. Qing Mu lowered her voice. There were only 2 people in the room. Even if it was disgraceful, they had been through so much together, so it was reasonable for them to say these words. Do they really hate him so much? Haven't they been fine for so many years? Concubine Lan cried. Qing Mu sighed. For the first time, she felt that her master was too naive. In the past, because His Highness was in poor health and in a precarious situation, His Highness had always given up on himself. No one needed to deal with His Highness, and His Highness could do it himself. Now that His Highness has recovered and is willing to live a good life with Prince Chen, he naturally attracted others' attention. Qing Mu was reminding Concubine Lan, but Concubine Lan obviously turned in another direction. She wiped her tears and said seriously, Is Prince Chen so good? How could she let him live? I've been devoted to him for so many years, but he didn't even treat me well. How could he be so cruel? Seeing that she actually thought of this, Qing Mu felt extremely helpless. After thinking for a while, he said in accordance with Concubine Lan's thoughts, although Prince Chen is one of the reasons, the other reason is that His Highness also wants to be stronger. Since he is strong, he will inevitably attract others to kill him. This time, Princess Chen should also be injured because of His Highness. How dare they? Concubine Lan's thoughts were drawn back again. She gritted her teeth and said with her beautiful face darkening, staring at the square bricks on the ground. Concubine Lan, for all this, what else do they dare not do? I'm afraid that His Highness's life will not be as easy to save as it was when he was ill. Seeing that his master was still not enlightened, Qing Mu added a harsh sentence to remind her. Concubine Lan suddenly stood up, and there was a great deal of coldness at the bottom of her always calm eyes. She twisted the handkerchief in her hand fiercely twice, and then said slowly, Invite the Emperor over tonight. Concubine Lan, are you willing to see the Emperor? Qing Mu said in surprise. The palace where Concubine Lan lived was basically a cold palace, and the Emperor would not set foot in it several times a year. On the one hand, it was inconvenient, and on the other hand, it was because of Concubine Lan's resistance. She was unwilling to let the Emperor come over, which made the palace become colder and colder. If it weren't for the guards at the door, the palace would have been trampled to pieces by other favored concubines. Concubine Lan nodded and said, Since they are unwilling to let us go, why should we let them go? After so many years, all of this originally belonged to Chen. No one can take it away. Concubine Lan, it's great that you can think like this. This originally belonged to His Highness. His Highness is the real Crown Prince. Qing Mu knelt down with tears in his eyes. She knew her master's bitterness and helplessness, but she felt that all of this belonged to His Highness Prince Chen. No matter from which aspect, everything belonged to Prince Chen. The others were unjustifiable and unjustifiable. I was really wrong, but this time, I won't make a mistake again. Concubine Lan wiped away her tears and pulled Qing Mu up. Looking at Qing Mu, who was crying uncontrollably, she became strong at this time. She couldn't retreat. For Chu Liuchen's sake, she couldn't retreat. Since those people wanted to kill Prince Chen, they had to step over her dead body first. Otherwise, she would step over their dead bodies. She had always known that this road would be bloody. As a member of the royal family, everyone knew it. In the past, she didn't fight for it because Chu Liuchen was in poor health. There was no point in fighting for it. The most important thing was to take good care of his health. At that time, those people didn't have such great malice towards Chu Liuchen. Now that Chu Liuchen had recovered and could run thousands of miles without any problem, it meant that his body had recovered. What had happened before also made Concubine Lan clearly realize that if she didn't fight for it at this time, she could only become a victim of others. She wouldn't become a victim again. No matter who said it was useless. In this life, it was enough to be a victim once. For the rest of her life, she would work hard for Chen. Even if she was smashed to pieces, it didn't matter. Anyway, she didn't care about anything. Order the imperial kitchen to prepare some wine and dishes for the emperor to eat when he comes in the evening. Concubine Lan said in a cold voice, and her eyes became deep. At this time, she had the demeanor she used to have. She was no longer the concubine Lan who seemed to stay out of the matter but was extremely weak. Your Highness, the imperial kitchen may not prepare anything good for us, Qingmu hesitated for a moment and said. Although the palace where concubine Lan lived had always had a high status, the so-called cold palace was guarded by guards. Even the empress didn't allow her to enter, which showed that concubine Lan was unusual. But people only hinted that she was unusual at the beginning. She had been in the palace for so long, but the emperor didn't go there and was forbidden. Who would care about a concubine like her? There were so many beauties and concubines who had just entered the palace. Who would care about a concubine like her, who seemed to be outdated? Many concubines who had just entered the palace almost didn't know about her, let alone the other people in the harem. Although the imperial kitchen also sent dishes, they were basically the most ordinary kind, and some were even worse. Concubine Lan didn't care about it. Only when she occasionally went to the imperial kitchen, she told her former colleague in the imperial kitchen that he would secretly prepare some good dishes. As for other people, no one knew who concubine Lan was. Some good dishes secretly prepared basically couldn't be compared with those of other concubines. Concubine Lan didn't eat much, and she only had a few hobbies. But they were not treasures, and she just needed to cook them well. But she couldn't do that today. Today, she specially invited the emperor over. Of course, she had to prepare some good dishes. The people in the imperial kitchen wouldn't pay attention to her. Today, ask them to prepare some good dishes for me. If they're not good, you can just make trouble. A trace of coldness flashed in concubine Lan's eyes. The empress is busy with her own affairs and has no time to pay attention to these things. Except for the empress, no one in the harem could interfere with her. For so many years, she had endured it and never fought. But now that they had forced her and to this point, there was no need to endure it anymore. Chapter 11-12. Does she really want to see me? The emperor pressed his hand on the table and almost stood up. He looked at Durong with great excitement. Durong lowered his head and said, "That's what Greenwood, the servant of concubine Lan, said. He asked you to come over tonight and wait for you in the Hall of Double Breath. Has she forgiven me? Has she forgiven me?" The emperor clenched his hands tightly, feeling excited. This was not a question, but more like a soliloquy. Durong did not dare to answer and lowered his head even more. After a long while, the emperor took a deep breath and controlled his emotions. A faint smile appeared on his solemn face. "You finally forgive me. The things that happened that year. The things that happened that year, in fact, were not all my fault." Durong did not dare to speak anymore. He just stood there motionlessly. After a long while, the emperor came to his senses and his eyes fell on a memorial in front of him. It was a memorial from the prime minister, which objected to him abolishing the empress. The prime minister said that the empress was the foundation of the country and could not be moved at will. Although the matter of Princess Chen seemed to be inextricably linked to the empress, there was no evidence to prove that the empress was the person behind everything. "Durong, what if I abolish the empress at this time and make concubine Lan the empress?" The emperor said slowly. "Your Majesty, you can't do that." This time, Durong could no longer remain silent. He knelt down with a plop, put his forehead on the ground, and did not dare to move. Concubine Lan was the taboo in the emperor's heart, which no one dared to touch. Durong knew this, so he did not dare to say anything in vain. But at this time, he had to say it. "Can't I?" "Why not?" The emperor suddenly became stubborn. "Your Majesty, please reconsider," Durong said. He did not dare to persuade the emperor deeply, so he could only say it implicitly. The emperor was silent for a long time, and then sighed heavily. "I owe her. I owe her. Your Majesty, you can't be blamed for this. It can only be said that it was an accident, Durong said in a low voice. For a moment, there was silence in the imperial study, and only the faint breathing between the two people could be heard. Get up, the emperor said. His voice seemed to have aged a lot all of a sudden. He waved his hand to signal Durong to get up. Durong got up cautiously and stole a glance at the emperor's face. He felt bitter in his heart. The emperor was old and was no longer the high-spirited prince he used to be. The emperor paused for a moment and then added another name, Chen, who is more suitable. His voice was not loud, but it shocked Durong so much that his face changed drastically. In the past, according to the emperor, only the first two princes were qualified to inherit. But now Prince Chen was added. Did this mean that the whole imperial court was about to change? In the past, Prince Chen had never been in the emperor's consideration, but now he thought it was reasonable. One of the most important reasons for excluding Prince Chen at that time was that Prince Chen was in poor health and in a precarious situation. Moreover, he was willful and reckless, even ignoring his own health. Now, it seemed like the only weakness was gone. Chen, In fact, Chen, is suitable now. The emperor's heavy sigh was very light, almost inaudible, but it fell into Durong's ears. Durong lowered his head more and more. He knew that he didn't need to say anything at this time. No one knew everything about the emperor and concubine Lan better than him, but he couldn't say anything and could only be a loyal listener. When the news came from the imperial palace, Chu Luchen accompanied Xiao Wanru to finish dinner. Chen Kai accompanied Xiao Wanru to finish dinner, and Chu Luchen helped Xiao Wanru walk a little. Mingqiu Nun told Xiao Wanru not to lie in the room all the time. If she was careful, the wound on her arm would not split open. As soon as the two of them walked out of the courtyard, they saw the chief butler coming in a hurry. Your Highness. The chief butler bowed and said respectfully. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and raised her watery eyes, which were dark but clear. Your Highness, you can go ahead with your work. I'll take Yujie and Chu Lu for a walk and ask them about what happened before. The chief butler wouldn't come here for no reason. There must be something important. Walk for a while, but don't walk too much. Chu Luchen nodded and put his hand down from Xiao Wanru's slender waist. I know. Xiao Wanru nodded and curved her watery eyes with a smile. You don't have to worry about the affairs in the palace for the time being. Just take good care of your injury. Chu Luchen reminded her again. I know, Xiao Wanru said again. She knew that Chu Luchen was worried that she didn't take good care of her injury. She reached out her hand and gently pulled his sleeve and shook it a little, looking a little delicate. It was true that she couldn't intervene in the affairs of the palace, let alone at this time. But she was worried that it would be inconvenient for Chu Luchen. After all, the harem was full of women. Chu Luchen, as a prince or a prince, was not suitable. But at this time, she knew that he was worried about her and would not let her intervene at will. Seeing that Xiao Wanru agreed, Chu Luchen showed a smile in his eyes and went to the front with the chief butler. In the study outside, Chu Luchen sat down, and the chief butler said excitedly, Your Highness, concubine Lan took the initiative to see the emperor. He was also a person who knew the inside story, so he understood the reason and consequences of concubine Lan's decision. The gentleness on Chu Liuchen's face slowly faded, and his eyes became cold. After a long while, he asked, Will the palace be peaceful today? It shouldn't be peaceful. Although concubine Lan has been inconspicuous for so many years, it doesn't mean that anyone can bully her at will, the chief butler said with bitterness in his heart. He had seen the little master's life for so many years. In fact, the little master was the most innocent one. Why did the little master become the one to bear all the responsibilities? Concubine Lan had been hiding in front of others for so many years. Although it seemed that she was protecting the little master, it was actually another kind of harm to the little master. Concubine Lan didn't have the ability to protect the little master, so how could she protect the little master? The little master was still young at that time, so no one took him seriously. The identity of the former emperor's legitimate son did not bring glory to the little master, but aroused others' jealousy and hatred. He was such a young child who didn't know anything. It was conceivable that he lived in a place like the palace. At that time, concubine Lan was immersed in her own sorrow, but she forgot that there was such a child who needed her care. After the little master grew up, concubine Lan seemed to realize that the child needed her care and protection, but the child no longer needed her. "Master, if concubine Lan becomes the empress," the chief butler added. This sentence immediately made him excited. He looked up at Chu Luchen with expectation. "She can't be the empress." Chu Luchen mercilessly interrupted the chief butler's thoughts. "But, she..." The chief butler still wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Chu Luchen rudely. "Contact Qingmu more often and make a deal with the empress. The empress will pay for it." What? The chief butler was stunned and almost couldn't believe his ears. The little master actually wanted to make a deal with the empress, but the empress had been defeated, so it was useless. Even if he wanted to make a deal, he should make a deal with concubine De, who was in the limelight now. "Chief butler, the empress has fallen. If we don't help her, she won't be abolished so easily. The old ministers in the court will protect her. Besides, if she loses her position because of Zhuozhua, Prince Shou's party will vent their anger on Zhuozhua, which will benefit Chu Liuyue's people." Chu Liuchen's expression remained unchanged and he said indifferently. Chu Liuyue was in power now, and Prince Shou's party was defeated. Moreover, Prince Shou's party was involved because of the empress. At this time, helping the empress could get unexpected results. He didn't think much of this effect before, but now he needed it. Should I contact the empress? After all, the chief butler had been in the palace for so long, and he was worried about the empress before. Now hearing Chu Liuchen's words, he immediately understood that this was the best way. "You don't have to go. Qingmu can go." This matter was started by concubine Lan, so of course, she is the most suitable person to go. Chu Liuchen's eyes fell out of the window in the direction of the palace. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth and said in a light tone. This day had finally come. This old servant understands. This old servant will tell Greenwood. The chief butler nodded repeatedly. At this time, the young master really couldn't show up. It would be best if it was concubine Lan's people who went out. Concubine Lan planned to rise in the palace. Since she didn't intend to keep a low profile, there was no need to hide it in front of the empress. But the chief butler was still worried. There were some things that others didn't know, but the empress knew. "Master, will the empress threaten concubine Lan with those things?" The chief butler thought for a while and brought up what he was worried about. "She won't dare. She hasn't dared to do it for so many years, and she won't dare to do it now. Otherwise, Chu Liuzhou's life will be gone," Chu Luchen said with a smile. His voice was gentle but sharp and cold, like an arrow shooting out with hostility. Chu Liuzhou was the empress's weakness. Both the empress and Chu Luchen knew it. "Don't worry, master. I know how to tell Qingmu." The chief butler understood and looked at his young master with admiration. He wanted to use Prince Zhou to restrain the empress and then let concubine Lan put forward the conditions. The empress would not refuse and had to agree. Several loyal people around concubine Lan, like the chief butler, had always had ideas, but concubine Lan didn't have any ideas, and the young master even abandoned himself to despair. Now everything was fine. The chief butler turned sideways and wiped his tears slightly, with gratification and excitement in his eyes. The young master would no longer be capricious and would cherish him. All this was because of Princess Chen. The chief butler respected Princess Chen more and more from the bottom of his heart. "I will arrange someone to inform Qingmu now." The chief butler calmed down his unstable breath and said. Chu Luchen waved his hand, and the chief butler left. And Cheng stood behind Chu Luchen with a smile. Although he didn't say a word just now, he heard it clearly. A trace of fierceness flashed across his eyes. He would do whatever the master wanted to do. Ask someone to keep an eye on Prince Shou. If there is any news from the palace that the empress doesn't respond, take action, Chu Luchin said coldly. Yes, master. Don't worry. I know what to do. Enqing nodded decisively. He needed to frighten the empress in the palace, so he had to take action against Prince Shou. What about the Empress Dowager? I have my own response. Chapter 11-13. In the next few days, it looked calm outside. The people in Prince Chen's mansion were also very quiet. Prince Chen's return did not make the gate much livelier. Instead, the gate became more guarded. The emperor sent some more guards over to guard Prince Chen's mansion like an iron bucket. Prince Chen needed to rest, and Princess Chen needed to rest even more. Prince Chen had taken some people away at that time, which caused the guards in Prince Chen's mansion to be empty. The court was still arguing about whether to abolish the empress. Compared with the emperor's sudden attack before, everyone in the court was prepared. They each had their own evidence in order to make the emperor agree with their ideas. The night before yesterday, something happened in the imperial kitchen. Many eunuchs and palace maids were replaced, and even the supervisor eunuch in charge of the imperial kitchen was replaced. The original supervisor eunuch was the empress's servant, so it was not surprising that he was replaced at this time. A well-informed even found out that the incident that day had something to do with concubine Lan. It was said that concubine Lan, who had been grounded, asked the imperial kitchen to prepare dishes to entertain the emperor. The people in the imperial kitchen did not take it seriously, which made the emperor furious. He reprimanded them severely and quickly replaced them. For a moment, everyone who knew the news was shocked. Some of the newly favored concubines had never even heard of the name, concubine Lan, before. How did she suddenly appear now? Some people wanted to know, while others went to inquire about it and secretly found out everything about concubine Lan. It was said that concubine Lan had been the emperor's concubine when he was still in the emperor's mansion. At the beginning, she was a concubine, a woman whom the emperor met and fell in love with at first sight when he was on a trip. At first, she was not raised in the mansion and only appeared in the mansion occasionally. Later, it was said that she was the former empress's younger sister. Such an identity was enough to be the emperor's concubine at that time, but at that time, the emperor already had a legal wife. While there was a lot of noise, the former emperor's wedding was over. After that, the emperor brought people into the palace and also brought concubine Lan in. It was unknown whether it was because concubine Lan was the former empress, but concubine Lan did not get the noble position of one of the 4 concubines. Instead, she was just an ordinary concubine Lan who did not even have a title. Later, for some reason, she angered the emperor and was locked up. She had been locked up for so many years. No one had expected that concubine Lan, who had been silent for so many years, would have a chance to make a comeback. Since the emperor had changed people because of her, it meant that the emperor cared about her. Such a person should have been worse than a concubine in the cold palace. At least there was no one guarding the cold palace, and she was locked up. She had been locked up for so many years, yet the emperor still cared about her and was angry because of her. It was clear that the emperor had never forgotten her. How many women did the emperor have? It was a lot. Some were dead, some were still alive, and new ones came. The emperor still cared about concubine Lan. It could be seen that concubine Lan was really in the emperor's heart. The emperor had always been very indifferent to the women in the harem. Although he would visit the harem, he mainly went to see the adult princes. He was very indifferent to the other concubines. There were many concubines who didn't see the emperor all the year round. Everyone originally thought that the emperor should care about concubine the most. A woman who could give birth to the eldest son of the emperor must be the one the emperor cared about the most. Moreover, concubine Da's title was only slightly inferior to that of the empress. What he meant was, of course, protecting the woman he cared about the most. But what did it mean now? Was concubine Lan the woman the emperor cared about? For a time, the harem was surging with undercurrents, and everyone was investigating concubine Lan. But the matter about concubine Lan was too simple. It was so simple that people found out about it easily. It was obvious that there was no need to inquire further. No one knew when the officials of the previous dynasty began to inquire about concubine Lan. If it was just a favorite concubine, the previous dynasty would not be alarmed, but Prince Chen was involved. If this concubine Lan really won the emperor's heart, she would definitely have a relationship with Prince Chen. In terms of relationship, this concubine Lan was Prince Chen's biological aunt. With such a biological aunt, Prince Chen would definitely be involved. There was a Buddha hall in the imperial palace. It was not very big, but it was very exquisite. Unlike the Buddha hall outside, there was a Buddha statue in the Buddha hall, which was really blessed with a golden body. On the futon in front of the Buddha statue in the middle, an old nun was sitting with her eyes down. She was knocking on the wooden fish with one hand and putting her palms together with the other, silently chanting scriptures. The door of the Buddha hall was slightly opened, and Hui Qing hurried in. "Master." Pushun Nun didn't open her eyes and asked slowly, "What's the matter?" "Master, I can't find out anything else about concubine Lan. The former empress's family has long been in decline, and they even retreated to their hometown. There are only some side branches in the capital city, so I can't get any information. They only say that concubine Lan seems to be an illegitimate daughter and was brought back later. The specific matter can't be found out by the side branches." Hui Qing reported. Pushun Nun opened her eyes. Her eyes were deep, but she didn't say anything and continued chanting scriptures. Hui Qing became anxious and couldn't help crying out, "Master, now, send this news to Xiao Baolin." Pushun Nun said. "Master, what's the use of Xiao Baolin? He's just an outdated. He's so beautiful, but he can't even compare with concubine Lan, who has been locked up for so long." Hui Qing said indifferently. She had tried to curry favor with Xiao Yenru before, but now she was very disdainful of her. Xiao Yenru was obviously beautiful and talented, and was taught by Pushun Nun in person. Why was she so useless that she ended up like this? What happens to Xiao Baolin has nothing to do with us. After all, she's my disciple. We can't watch her fall into such a situation. Pushun Nun said slowly. After that, she put down the wooden fish in her hand, put her palms together, and chanted the name of Buddha with a compassionate face. Hui Qing was a little angry. Why did she have to give the news that she had worked so hard to find out to Xiao Baolin for free? But seeing that her master closed her eyes again, she knew that it was useless for her to object. She could only say angrily, "Master, should we send the news to her from the tower as before?" "There's no need to let her know. Everyone has their own fate," Pushun Nun said lightly. After the smoke curled up, her expression became more and more solemn. "Master, I know." Hui Qing also put her palms together and answered. She carefully retreated to the door and looked back at her master, who was seriously worshipping Buddha. Hui Qing really felt that her master was too kind to Xiao Baolin. Even if there was any relationship between master and disciple, in fact, she had helped him so much, and it was almost enough. She shook her head and sighed angrily. Hui Qing really felt that her master had done too much. What did she say? Hui Ming came out of nowhere. When she saw Hui Qing, she lowered her voice and asked. What else can she do? Master means that she can help as much as she can. She said that she can't watch Xiao Baolin live such a hard life in the palace. Hui Qing was very angry. We have a lot of things to do, and we still have to help Xiao Baolin. Just don't let her drag us down. After entering the palace, Hui Qing had not been idle. She was much busier than when she was in the Yuhui nunnery. From time to time, she had to deal with the S. These S were all very arrogant. Although they were disgraceful in front of the emperor, they all pretended to be favored concubines in front of her. From time to time, there were also arrogant and domineering people who came here to make trouble for her master. One time, she said that she wanted to learn painting. The other time, she said that she wanted to recite scriptures. She even said that she wanted to recite the Sutra of Rebirth for her parents here. She made the people in the hall confused. Fortunately, her master had a good temper. She couldn't bear it anymore. It was not that she couldn't go back to the Yuhui nunnery. As long as her master mentioned it a few times, there would always be a chance. But her master endured everything. Huiqing, don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Xiao Baolin is still useful to me. Xiao Baolin is not stupid. She will find a way to save herself. She still has a chance now. Hui Ming could see further than Huiqing and understood some of Pushun Nun's intentions. She immediately warned in a low voice, "You complain so much. Don't ruin my master's plan." "Don't worry, it won't be ruined. I will remember all the things that my master told me and will not miss anything." Huiqing said repeatedly and then sighed, "I know that my master also has a reason to bear it." It was not easy for her to enter the imperial palace. Of course, she won't go out like this. But it is actually very dangerous here. We can't take care of ourselves. How can we have the spare energy to take care of Xiao Baolin? She asked for it. Huiqing was not satisfied with her master's attitude that she cared so much about Xiao Baolin. Fundamentally speaking, Xiao Baolin was also her master's disciple. For a nun, as long as he was not a disciple in the Dharma, he was not a real disciple. But in fact, it was not the same. Why was she, as a formal disciple, not as good as a painting and calligraphy disciple who was accepted halfway? Well, don't complain. Master will be angry. Hui Ming warned Huiqing, "Hurry up and think of a way to send the news to Xiao Baolin." "I got it. I'll make the arrangements now. You should be careful here. Xiao Baolin will probably send someone to ask for your opinion." Huiqing nodded. Then, she curled her lips mockingly. "What do you think Xiao Baolin means? I got the news from here and sent it to you. She even asked you if you should be careful of me. I just masked my face and didn't let her see who I was. After sending so much news, she still hasn't confirmed whether I have good intentions or not. Xiao Baolin is not as smart as my master said. She is also cautious. Compared with you, who shows your face but doesn't show your face, of course, Xiao Baolin cares more about my master and will listen to her. This is very good. With one in the open and the other in the dark, we can handle things better." Hui Ming didn't have the same idea as Huiqing and immediately explained. Seeing that it was getting late, the two of them arranged to act according to Pushun Nun's instructions. Since entering the palace, in fact, only Pushun Nun was guarding the Buddha Hall. Even Xiao Yenru didn't know that the person who often sent her news from the tower in the palace was Huiqing, whom she knew. Chapter 11:14. Xiao Wanru sat in front of Chu Luchen. Her black hair had just been combed. Chu Luchen was drying it for her and accidentally touched her arm. Xiao Wanru sensed that Chu Luchen's hand froze. She stretched out her injured hand, gently pulled his sleeve, and said with a soft smile, "Mingqiu Nun and Dr. Qi's medicine is good. It's almost healed. The wound won't burst open if I don't use force." As she said, she pulled his sleeve down with a little force. "Okay, I see. Don't pull it. If you pull it again, my handkerchief will fall off." Chu Luchen said helplessly. He reached out to touch her hair and found that it was almost dry. Then he put down the handkerchief in his hand and led her to lie on his lap. Her black hair was spread out just like that. He changed a comb and carefully combed it for her. Xiao Wanru opened her eyes and looked at his serious and handsome face. She watched him carefully combing her long hair. When he encountered the knots, he also carefully combed them for her. In order not to pull herself, he carefully pinched the top of the knots with his hand and then combed them with the comb. Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes again and again. Her eyes were soft. If she was asked to imagine such a scene in her rebirth, she would never be able to imagine it. Everything in the last life had gone with the wind. Even if there was something between her and him, she could not remember it. Fortunately, there was still this life. In this life, he unconsciously walked into her heart and was no longer the cruel and bloodthirsty man in her memory. This man fell into her heart, maybe not only in this life, but also in the last life. Her blurry and lost memories might be all of her memories with him. Fortunately, in this life, the two of them came together. Her eyes turned red unconsciously. The last memory of the last life was cut off by him. What's wrong? Does it hurt? Seeing Xiao Wanru's eyes turn red, Chu Luqian put down the comb in his hand, gently pressed her forehead, and asked softly. No. Tears suddenly fell from the corner of her eyes and slowly slid down her white and tender cheeks. Chu Luqian sighed softly, suddenly lowered his head and kissed her pink cherry lips. At this moment, Xiao Wanru froze. All her senses seemed to be in this warm kiss. The surging feelings were so turbulent, but he was so careful. She could smell his strong breath with a faint smell of medicine, but it made Xiao Wanru realize that the person in front of her was Chu Luqian. Her long eyelashes hid the trace of excitement in her eyes. She could feel his hot breath and the corner of her lips. In fact, this position was not comfortable. His chin even pressed against her nose, and all the breath seemed to gather on him, making it difficult for her to breathe, but it made her feel extremely at ease. Her hands involuntarily wrapped around his neck, but after exerting strength, she felt a tingling pain in her arm, and let out a low cry. Ah! Chu Luqian moved his lips away from her cherry lips and looked at her with his handsome eyes slightly fixed. There was still a blazing heat in his eyes. What's wrong? Are you hurt? As he spoke, he raised his hand and gently lifted her injured hand, letting her wide sleeves fall down. Looking at the white bandage inside and seeing that there were no traces, he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, you're fine. I'm okay. I'm okay. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and murmured. At that moment, he was not the only one who forgot his love, but also she. Can we continue? Chu Luqian's eyes lit up. He looked into her watery eyes with a pair of charming eyes and asked gently, but the meaning in his words was hard to say. Xiao Wanru never expected that he would ask such a question. Her face was as red as blood. Could he be more cheeky? She used her other hand to pinch his hand hard. Okay, I got it. There's still a long way to go. It's not appropriate for you to do it now. Let's talk about it when you get better. Chu Luqian said seriously, as if it was normal for him to say, have you eaten? Xiao Wanru blushed and bit her lip. She looked at Chu Luqian, who showed such an elegant look, but said such shameless words. Could this person be more shameless? Chu Luqian covered her sleeves again, put down her hand, and gently put it down. Then he glanced at Xiao Wanru's little face, which was as red as burning. After thinking for a while, he felt that he couldn't bear it anymore, so he lowered his head and kissed her forehead gently. Then he raised his head and said very naturally, I can only do this now. Why haven't you reached the marriageable age yet? Xiao Wanru suddenly closed her eyes. She felt ashamed to look at him anymore. This person actually said such suggestive words openly. Was he not afraid of losing his reputation as gentle as jade? Well, in fact, he only had a reputation as gentle as jade. In fact, his actions had nothing to do with being gentle as jade. He was just deceiving those who saw him for the first time. Whoever took it seriously would be unlucky. In fact, I've really waited for a long time. Chu Luqian's sigh in her ears made her feel even more ashamed. He still looked like he had suffered a big loss. What did he mean? How did you go with the Empress Dowager? About the encirclement. In order to change the topic, Xiao Wanru suppressed her shame and anger and had to change the topic. She heard Chu Luqian's clear laughter in her ears. Needless to say, it was she who was laughing. Xiao Wanru pretended not to hear it and continued to ask, what about it? She finally found that she couldn't compare with Chu Luqian in being thick-skinned. It was better to change the topic and talk about something serious. Of course, someone framed you. First, They besieged Prince Chen's mansion and wanted to kill you. Then there was the encirclement. This matter was related to Nanny Wei, who served Imperial Grandmother. Then you were drugged. Fortunately, you didn't eat at that time, so you survived. But there was always such a thing. Chu Luqian continued Xiao Wanru's words. Looking at Xiao Wanru's look, Chu Luqian knew that if he continued to talk, she would become angry out of shame. At this time, it was better to stop while he was ahead, lest she get angry and scratch him. He was most experienced in stroking cats. Didn't he stroke the cat before comfortably? How is Nanny Wei? Xiao Wanru suddenly opened her watery eyes and asked subconsciously when she saw Chu Luqian's handsome eyes. In fact, Nanny Wei was a key figure. However, this key figure seemed to be abolished without any important role. Imperial Grandmother demoted Nanny Wei, but she still serves Imperial Grandmother. She said that Imperial Grandmother has been using her for so many years and can't leave her for a while. She was also bewitched by her nephew before, so she deliberately led you to give Empress Dowager something that she didn't like. She won't do it again. Chu Luqian replied with a faint smile. When they went to the Palace of Benevolent Peace before, Nanny Wei kept kowtowing to him and said that she couldn't bear to leave Empress Dowager. At this time, Empress Dowager was ill, and there was no suitable person to take care of her. At this time, she would not leave even if she died. She begged him to forgive and spare her. When Empress Dowager recovered in the future, she would let Empress Dowager deal with everything. Chu Luqian agreed at that time. Did you deliberately keep her? Xiao Wanru thought for a while and asked tentatively. It's good to keep her. It's much better to have such an obvious one than to keep her in the dark. She was right about one thing. Imperial Grandmother is not in good health. At this time, Imperial Grandmother will definitely feel uncomfortable if someone else serves her. It's better to keep her and let someone keep an eye on her. Chu Luqian reached out and gently combed Xiao Wanru's hair, with a touch of darkness in his eyes. His black pupils were almost bottomless and dark. Xiao Wanru didn't see his eyes. She just thought for a while and said, "That's good." It was better for Nanny Wei to be exposed than not. Even if Nanny Wei persuaded the Empress Dowager in the future and stayed with the Empress Dowager, it was inconvenient for her to say anything for Wei Dahai. After all, the cause of this matter was Wei Dahai. As for the matter of the previous court, Chu Luqian would deal with it since so many men in black came to Prince Chen's mansion, and Xiao Wanru wouldn't ask much. She just needed to recuperate now, and Chu Luqian should worry about other affairs. Since Chu Luqian returned to the mansion, Xiao Wanru felt much more relaxed. It seemed that she didn't have to worry about anything because Chu Luqian was there. Chu Luqian helped her up and embraced her in an embrace with a faint fragrance of medicine. Chu Luqian's embrace was not wide but inexplicably firm, which made her feel that she was no longer wandering. She put her head close to Chu Luqian's neck and smelled his warm breath. She felt lazy, as if she could not think about anything and could be protected by him at any time. Just like a fearless woman, she felt that she would always have someone to rely on at any time. This kind of feeling was so good that it made Xiao Wanru want to cry. In her last life, she had drifted so far, and in this life, her life was also drifting. In fact, what she wanted most was a warm and safe harbor, which could calm her anxious heart. Sensing Xiao Wanru's dependence, Chu Luqian reached out to hold her tighter in his arms. Her fragrant and soft body filled the softest part of Chu Luqian's heart. He had always been unaffectionate. Even if he could give up himself, there was nothing he couldn't give up. However, Xiao Wanru was the only one he cared about, even more than himself. For the sake of the woman in his arms, he must be stronger so that he could protect her. He glanced at her injured arm. Therefore, he was not strong enough, so that she suffered so much for him. The previous arrangements could be catalyzed one by one. Since he had taken a fancy to that position, he would not give it to others. Even if he had to create a bloody hell for it, so what? There was a smile in his eyes. If Xiao Wanru saw his smile at this time, she would find that such a smile was both handsome and elegant, but also soul-stirring. The smile of a picturesque beautiful young man was so creepy that it made people feel cold. He was like an Asura who climbed out of the bloody hell, bloodthirsty and evil. Chapter 11:15. Qian. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. As night fell, the palace was very quiet. There were many disputes in the palace now, and no one dared to walk around for fear of causing trouble. The recent changes in the palace were confusing. The doors of an empty palace hall were ajar. The Empress, along with her 2 trusted aides, silently appeared at the palace doors. This place was rather far from Fengyi Palace. The Empress could not remember who had once lived here. When the Emperor had moved into the palace, this place had always been empty. It seemed that one of the previous emperor's concubines had been the last occupant of this place. After so many years, no one had lived here again. This palace was not big, but it was also one of the main palaces in the palace. When the emperor first entered the palace, he conferred several S in the main palaces, and then he didn't confer any S in the main palaces. Other new S didn't have the position of the master of a palace, so several palaces were empty, and the one in front of them should be the same. The light was lit in the depths of the hall. The woman holding the lamp looked at the Empress with her beautiful eyes. Her eyes were calm but cold. Although she was not as tall as the Empress, her imposing manner startled the Empress and she couldn't help but stop. How long had it been since the Empress saw a woman who could stand proudly in front of her? Looking at her face, which was so beautiful that it made people feel ashamed, she inexplicably felt jealousy and hatred in her heart. Princess Chen's appearance was also stunning, but this kind of stunning beauty was only a girl's stunning beauty. Compared with the face in front of her, there was no danger at all. Only the face in front of her made her feel a sense of suppressed grievance, anger, and jealousy. Yes, she was as angry as she was jealous at the beginning. The Empress's eyes almost spurted out fire. She looked at the woman in front of her with resentment and said, "Concubine Lan, you are really unfaithful to your wife." Concubine Lan quietly put the lamp in her hand on the candlestick in front of her, and then turned around. In the shadow of the lamp, Qingmu was carefully on guard. Everyone in Concubine Lan's palace had always been on guard against the Empress. "Empress, do you dare to say this to His Majesty?" Concubine Lan put down the lamp, turned around, looked at the Empress, and said slowly. For a woman like her, after her expression darkened, she would have an aura. This kind of aura actually caused the Empress Mother's aura to stop. It was as though something had coincidentally stepped on her aura and caused her to become slightly weaker. You're still the same." The Empress gritted her teeth and cursed. "Empress, please be careful with your words." Concubine Lan raised her beautiful eyes disdainfully. "After so many years, you are still so hot-tempered. Don't you think it's not good? Why aren't you dead yet?" The Empress gritted her teeth. "If I die, you won't have peace either. I'm afraid the Empress has forgotten who is the one who wants to kill you." Concubine Lan sat down on a chair on one side, pointed to the chair opposite her, and said, "Empress, don't you want to sit down and talk?" "I don't want to talk to a concubine who has fallen into the cold palace." The Empress took a step forward proudly and said. "If the Empress says so, please go back. There is no possibility of cooperation between us. I can go to Concubine Da. Maybe Concubine Da will be very willing to cooperate with me." Concubine Lan's face darkened. She pointed to the outside of the hall and said indifferently. The way she spoke reminded the Empress of a scene in the past. At that time, the woman in front of her was also sitting there with great dignity. But she had to kneel at her feet. This was a feeling of humiliation, but it made the Empress sober. At this time, if she did not agree to Concubine Lan's request, Concubine Lan would definitely cooperate with Concubine Da. With Concubine Da's character, she would definitely agree to cooperate. After all, Concubine Da did not know the inside story as well as she did. If you continue to force me, don't blame me for revealing your scandal," the Empress said sternly. Concubine Lan rolled her long eyelashes, picked up the teapot on the table indifferently, poured herself a cup, and then pushed the teapot in front of her. She said slowly, if the Empress wants to say it, just say it. I'm afraid that even Prince Zhou will be implicated if you say it. If she could say it, she would have said it long ago. Concubine Lan knew how much the Empress hated her. If possible, she would definitely kill her. But she did not dare to say it, not even to her own son. She was afraid that if her son leaked it, it would be a disaster. She could only keep it to herself and not tell anyone. You. The Empress was so angry that her face turned livid. In the end, her reason prevailed. Tell me how to cooperate. Concubine Lan looked at the Empress and said word by word, I guarantee that your position as the Empress will be stable. You can propose that Prince Qin be the crown prince of the East Palace. Hearing what Concubine Lan said, the Empress flew into a rage. Her eyes were stern and terrifying. Impossible. Concubine Lan, give up. I will never say such a thing. Concubine Lan was not surprised by the Empress's words. She reached out and gestured, since the Empress is unwilling, just pretend that I didn't say it. The previous court has been talking about the abolition of the Empress. You should know what the Emperor wants. Even if you don't mention it, I can find other concubines to mention it, but it won't be as effective as yours. Of course, without the position of Empress, even if I can't be the Empress, I will become a high-ranking concubine. At that time, I can raise Prince Qin under my name. Maybe he will be the successor. As for Prince Zhou. Concubine Lan paused for a moment. Then she looked at the Empress, who slowed down and said with a smile, Mother has been abolished from the position of the Empress. No matter how promising Prince Zhou is, he has nothing to do with the suspended throne. Next, it depends on the game between Prince Yu, Prince Chen, and Prince Cheng. Prince Zhou is the legitimate son of the Emperor. The Empress suddenly turned around with a livid face and looked at Concubine Lan with hatred. There is no one to be the Empress, so how can there be a legitimate son? Prince Chen is the only direct descendant. From this point of view, you will benefit greatly from being abolished from the position of the Empress. Maybe I shouldn't have come to meet you today, Concubine Lan said indifferently. What do you want? The Empress was not stupid. Although her face was pale, she could still ask the key question. I don't want to do anything. I just want to give Prince Qin a chance to compete fairly. As for whether he will succeed in the future or not, it's up to fate. It's not something I can control. Now that I am like this, do you think I can help him? Concubine Lan's voice was soft, and her eyes were deep, which made people feel inexplicably sad. The identity of the former emperor's eldest son was indeed very precious, but he belonged to the former emperor. At this time, he might even become the confidant and enemy of other princes. Looking at Concubine Lan like this, the Empress felt very comfortable. The expression of her old rival was indeed more useful than any explanation, and it also calmed her heart. If they were divided, both sides would lose, and if they were united, both sides would benefit. She mentioned that Chu Luqian would not really succeed to the throne of the East Palace. If her words were so useful, after so many years, her son would have become the crown prince of the East Palace. The Emperor may not listen to my words. The Empress said slowly. You just need to submit a memorial, and the rest is up to fate. At least Prince Qin should have such a chance, shouldn't he? Concubine Lan curled the corner of her mouth, and her smile was a little sarcastic. The sarcasm didn't seem to be ridiculing the Empress, but more like ridiculing herself. Then how can I guarantee that you will help me and let me regain the power of the imperial harem? The Empress's eyes flickered, and she asked. Your Highness, do you still want to control the imperial harem? Concubine Lan said. The Empress was stunned. Concubine Lan, didn't you say that you would help me? Could it be that you were just teasing this consort? Your Highness, I just said that I would not let the Emperor depose the Empress and let you sit firmly in the position of the Empress. I didn't say that you would definitely regain the power of the imperial harem. The things you committed before are not all innocent, are they? If the Emperor continues to investigate, he may find out other things. Concubine Lan said coldly. The Empress's momentum weakened, and she tilted her head uneasily to avoid Concubine Lan's eyes. I didn't poison Princess Chen, nor did I assassinate her. Concubine Lan interrupted the Empress's words. Your Highness's words are useless to me. It's only useful to the Emperor. I don't know if the Emperor will listen to what you say. If the Emperor listened to her, he wouldn't have deposed the Empress. I will definitely find out who framed my people behind the scenes. The Empress gritted her teeth and said fiercely. The people accused by Princess Chen's servant girl were all related to her, but she didn't ask them to do anything. At most, she just asked them to inquire about the news. How did they become the masterminds behind the scenes and even led to the assassination of Princess Chen? The Empress used to think that the imperial harem was under her control. Only now did she realize that her control had become self-righteous. It must be that bitch, Concubine Da. At this time, she was the only one who benefited the most from the accident. After this matter was over, she would definitely not let Concubine Da off. In that case, let's wait for the Empress's memorial. Concubine Lan said. But how do you want me to believe you? The Empress asked again. This time, she didn't dare to ask about regaining the power. At present, the most important thing was to stabilize the position of the Empress. The future could be discussed later. Your Highness, remember that I won't break my promise. It won't do me any good. The Empress's memorial will only be more powerful when you are the Empress. If you don't want to be the Empress, you might as well find another concubine to submit the memorial, Concubine Lan said lightly with a faint smile. These words made the Empress's heart beat faster, but she also knew that it was true. She flicked her sleeves and said, Concubine Lan, wait for my good news, but please behave yourself. Don't force me to turn against you. Don't worry, Your Highness. I'll try my best. Concubine Lan said. Her eyes fell on the Empress's back, hiding the hatred and pain in her eyes. If she could, she just wanted to kill the Empress. If it weren't for the woman in front of her, all this might not have happened. It was this woman who framed her. Chapter 11:16. The Empress's memorial caused an uproar in the already shocked court. Many officials' faces changed greatly. Could Prince Chen be the crown prince of the Eastern Palace? Only the Empress, who was about to be deposed, dared to say this. However, because of the Empress's words, many people secretly sided with the Empress and felt that the Empress was worthy of being the Empress. After all, the Empress also had a son, Prince Shou. Instead of mentioning Prince Shou, she mentioned Prince Chen. It could be seen that the Empress was indeed selfless and should not harm Princess Chen. For a moment, the focus of everyone's attention immediately shifted from the matter of deposing the Empress to the matter of establishing the heir. Although the matter of deposing the Empress was a big deal and closely related to the previous dynasty, it did not have a great impact on the previous dynasty as the matter of establishing the crown prince. It was unreasonable to establish a nephew instead of a son. However, considering the former emperor, Prince Chen was indeed the most legitimate heir. It was also reasonable to establish Prince Chen as the crown prince. More than 10 years after the former emperor's death, there were still many old officials who missed the former emperor and wanted to help Prince Chen ascend to the throne. However, Prince Chen's previous health was really disappointing. It was said that he was in a precarious condition. Of course, such a body could not sit on the throne. However, now many people felt that Prince Chen had recovered. Even if he was not well, he was almost the same as an ordinary person. Judging from the fact that he rushed to the capital city to celebrate the birthday of the Empress Dowager, it could be seen that he definitely needed a strong body to run so fast. Although some people had said that Prince Chen had recovered, everyone felt that it was unbelievable. After all, he had been ill for more than 10 years and had almost lost his life several times. How could he recover so quickly? But now, everyone no longer doubted that Prince Chen had really recovered. Facts spoke louder than words, and everything was based on facts. Since Prince Chen was in good health, he naturally had the right to inherit. Not to mention his identity as the eldest legitimate son of the former emperor, even the current emperor could still rank Prince Chen in the East Palace. When the emperor ascended the throne, he said in front of the officials that he treated Prince Chen as his own son and let Prince Chen be ranked among the princes. Prince Chen also called himself son in front of the emperor. Since he also had the title of father and son, of course he had the right to inherit. Compared with a pure nephew like Commandery Prince Qing, Prince Chen's reason was more reasonable. There was another quarrel in the imperial court. This time, the quarrel was about whether Prince Chen could be appointed to the East Palace. Some people agreed, while others objected. The censors all expressed their opinions, saying all kinds of things. Even the censors themselves were divided into two factions. Both sides insisted on their own opinions and could not come to an agreement. Almost all the ministers in the imperial court were involved. Only a few princes looked very indifferent, as if nothing had anything to do with them. There were also a few important ministers who maintained their attitude and did not join in the quarrel. Compared to the previous matter of the abolition of the empress, the scope of the quarrel this time was even greater. Every day, the court officials went to the court to think of ways to make the emperor agree with them. It could be said that they racked their brains. As for in private, there was even more undercurrent surging. At this time, who cared about the abolition of the empress? The emperor's attitude was unpredictable. Wearing the crown of the emperor, he sat high in the main hall and watched the ministers quarrel without saying a word. It was a little far away, so the expression on his face could not be seen clearly. Prince Qing secretly glanced up and hurriedly lowered his head. Although he stood close to the front, he could not see the emperor's face clearly. Was he angry or resentful? Prince Qing guessed that there were several attitudes. If he got the throne, the ministers all asked him to pass the throne to his nephew. If it were him, he would also be angry. It was not that he had no sons. Obviously, he had 3 adult sons. Why should he pass the throne to his nephew? But he really could not see through his brother. Until now, he could not even say a word. Could it be that he really had a good relationship with Prince Chen? Or was the death of the late emperor really an accident? Prince Qing still felt that it was very impossible. There were some things that he also vaguely inquired about and also set up a trap. He did not believe that the late emperor died so easily. Did he die just after taking the medicine? Previously, he secretly plotted with others, but did not expose the matter of that year in public, but pushed the matter of Prince Chen to the front of the stage. Prince Qing did not expect that the empress would submit a memorial to ask Prince Chen to be the crown prince. Chu Luqian was the nephew that he did not think highly of. Compared with Chu Liuxin, he felt that Chu Luqian was less dangerous. It was impossible for the throne to fall into the hands of this invalid. In the past, Prince Cheng's attention had never been on Chu Luqian. Everything involving Prince Chen's mansion was also because Prince Chen could be used to cause things, or Prince Chen's mansion could become the center of contradictions and become a sharp sword to attack others. But he did not expect that one day, this sharp sword would have the meaning of autonomy. It caught Prince Qing off guard. When did Chu Luqian recover? Why didn't he know anything about it? So that he could not deal with it at the moment and did not even know what to do for a while. After so many years of planning, in order to avoid arousing the suspicion of his brother, he even repeatedly insisted on becoming a monk. He did not even marry a princess, and now he had no children. Originally, he thought that his plan had been very comprehensive, but he did not expect Chu Luqian to appear out of nowhere. If he had heard that Chu Luqian had recovered earlier, he would have definitely taken action secretly and tried his best to deal with him. He would not have ignored him like before. But it was too late at this time. Prince Qing could be sure that after this, no matter what the emperor's attitude was, Prince Qin could be the crown prince of the Eastern Palace, which had become the consideration of many officials. Moreover, some officials who had stayed in the previous dynasty had basically become important officials. Compared with his more than 10 years of planning, Chu Liuqian's move was very high profile, but also very powerful. If anyone tried to deal with him with all his strength, it would inevitably arouse others' suspicion. Just like Chu Liuzhou and Chu Lulu, there was almost no conflict between them on the surface, even though they kept making moves in private. The important thing was to let Chu Luchen take the initiative. First, he made the officials believe that he was fine, and then the Empress submitted a memorial. Everything was almost perfect, and success came naturally. Clenching his fists hard, Prince Ching lowered his head. He could bear it, but his two nephews couldn't. They had originally thought that the throne was in their hands. He just waited for them to fight first, and then he would reap the benefits. His strength was still a little weak, and those people could still cooperate with him. At least it was not a big deal to make appropriate concessions to those people after he got the throne. Prince Ching made up his mind, lowered his head, and listened to the officials quarreling. Chu Yoyo's eyes turned coldly. From time to time, they fell on Chu Luchen, and then moved down. Chu Yoyo's face was the most ugly, and it was also the most obvious. However, he also lowered his head hard. He was afraid that others would find out something from his face. The memorial submitted by the Empress Dowager turned out to be Chu Luchen. Prince Zhou almost smashed everything in the study. Chu Liuxin also came to the court. He still looked completely empty, looking at the space in front of him, as if no matter how fierce the quarrel around him was, it had nothing to do with him. Among the several princes, he was the youngest, but he looked the most dispirited and listless. He had been in this state for a long time. He had been reprimanded by the emperor several times, but Chu Liuxin still did what he wanted, as if he couldn't be persuaded and had no strength. When it was almost time, Durong called for the end of the court. The emperor left with his people, leaving the courtiers who had just quarreled with each other with red faces and necks, without saying a word. Since the emperor was gone, there was no need to quarrel. The hall immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at each other, snorted coldly, and left with a flick of their sleeves. The princes walked at the back, and Chu Luchen habitually walked behind, but he saw Chu Lulu stop and wait for him. "Third brother. What's the matter, big brother?" Chu Luchen said lightly. "Third brother, you're really good at planning," Prince Zhou couldn't help saying. His face was livid, and he clenched his fists. He was afraid that he couldn't help but want to fight. "Second brother, what do you mean?" Chu Luchen suddenly smiled lazily, reached out his hand, and pointed at Chu Liuzhou's hand in the air. "Second brother, do you think it's better for the courtiers to talk about abolishing the empress?" His words made Chu Liuzhou's face suddenly turn pale, and his anger immediately receded like the tide. He was not really stupid, but just a little impulsive. At this time, he was reminded by Chu Luchen. Looking at Chu Liuzhou beside him, he snorted and turned to leave. He was afraid that if he walked slowly, he couldn't help but strangle Chu Luchen and Chu Luchen. Abolishing the empress was equivalent to abolishing him. Compared with asking Chu Luchen for help, it was much better for him personally. Chu Liuzhou was very anxious and wanted to ask his mother what she meant. But these days, even if he entered the palace, he couldn't enter the Fengyi Palace. The empress always refused him on the grounds that she was not feeling well. It could be said that since the incident, he had not seen the empress in private. "Third brother, how about taking a walk together?" Chu Luchen watched Chu Liuzhou leave and invited him. "Okay." Chu Luchen replied lazily. The two of them walked out of the hall one after the other. Chu Liuxin was about to leave, but at this time, he hesitated and followed them. The last one to walk out of the hall was Prince Cheng. Looking at his nephews in front of him, he was not in the mood to join in the fun. Originally, he should show that he didn't care about anything. At this time, he couldn't let his brother find out anything. He turned around and went to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. The Empress Dowager was ill. These days, Prince Cheng went to the palace to accompany the Empress Dowager and take care of her. Compared with others, he was definitely the most filial one. Of course, compared with others, Prince Cheng also knew his worst weakness. Normally, his brother would not pass the throne to him in any case. Unless all his nephews were dead, or even if they were not dead, they would be disabled. That would be his last chance. Of course, it would be better if he had a posthumous edict of the late emperor. The system of inheritance between brothers was the most perfect system. If his brother could do it, so could he. Chu Luchen had caught him off guard, so he had to act faster. Chapter 11:17. Chu Luchen and Chu Luchen walked side by side in front, and Chu Yoshin walked behind them. The three of them did not speak for a while, and only the sound of footsteps could be heard. Third brother, I admire you. Chu Luchen suddenly turned back and said with a smile. What do you want to say? Chu Luchen asked with a smile, with a trace of sarcasm in his eyes. The four-clawed dragon on the king's robe looked imposing, which made his handsome and delicate face look more refined. But there was a kind of coldness in this refined look, which made Chu Luchen feel cold. He immediately remembered that Chu Luchen in front of him was not easy to deal with. Even though he was the eldest son of his father, he had never been in a good position in front of him. Chu Luchen coughed in a low voice and turned his head. He felt that he was impulsive. It was obviously not a rational thing to confront Chu Luchen at this time. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru's figure appeared in his mind, and he frowned for a moment. How is the Empress now? Big brother, this question is strange. Shouldn't you ask second brother? If the Empress wants to see second brother, why does she want to see me? Chu Liuchen's eyes were gloomy. Third brother, have you found out who did the thing about Princess Chen? Chu Luchen coughed again in a low voice and changed the previous inappropriate topic. Big brother, who do you think did it? Chu Luchen asked him in reply with a gentle smile. His every movement became more and more attractive, graceful and luxurious. Chu Luchen was stunned again and secretly gritted his teeth. Chu Luchen had always been difficult to deal with. I don't know, so I asked you. Can't you find out who did it? Chu Luchen said. Chu Liuchen's expression remained unchanged, and there was a bit of evil coldness in his smile. Isn't everyone investigating? Big brother, you have been investigating longer than me. I have only been back in the capital for a few days. Such a big thing happened in Prince Chen's mansion. Of course, those involved had to investigate and ask to prove their innocence. Not only the emperor was investigating, but several mansions were also assisting the emperor in investigating. Chu Luchen was extremely angry. Chu Luchen was really watertight, but he asked the right questions. Chu Luchen suppressed his anger and said slowly in a low voice, since this matter is related to the imperial palace, it's better for father to investigate it. Before father finds out the truth, third brother needs to be careful when investigating. Be careful? What did big brother mean? Could it be that you want this king to stop investigating? My princess was injured and almost lost her life. Do you want me to be careful? Chu Luiying asked. Although his tone was harsh, he still had a gentle smile on his face. In Chu Lu's eyes, such a smile was almost dazzling. He wanted to lose his temper, but he had too many misgivings. He flicked his sleeves and said with an ugly expression on his face, since third brother has said so, this king will not meddle in your business. After that, he ignored Chu Luchen and strode away with a straight face. Chu Luchen watched him leave with a smile, and then turned around. When he was about to leave, he saw that Chu Yoshin was still behind him. Fourth brother, what's the matter? I'm fine. Chu Yoshin stammered and stepped aside to let Chu Luchen go first. Chu Luchen glanced at him and didn't care. He turned around and went to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. His grandmother was ill, so he went to see her first before going back to the mansion. Xiao Wanru told him that there was no need to rush back to the mansion today. She said that Marquis Xing's mansion would send someone to see her. It should be Marquis Xing's mansion's grandma Zhao Shiran. He had nothing to do if he went back early. Chu Yoshin watched Chu Luchen leave. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and then he slowly lowered his head. In fact, he shouldn't have asked about her. It was best not to ask. Now, he had no right to ask whether she was safe or not. The relationship between the two of them was that of uncle and sister-in-law. They were no longer unmarried. Even if he fell in love with her first, so what? In the end, the person she married was not him, but his third brother. Your Highness, shall we go back to the mansion first? Seeing him standing in a daze, Xiao Liuzi carefully reminded him. Chu Liuxin took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. His spirit collapsed again. Let's go back to the mansion first. Your Highness, concubine Ming asked you to go to her palace first after the court meeting, Xiao Liuzi said. Chu Liuxin waved his hand and said, no, let's go back. Of course, he knew what his mother meant. She wanted him to marry a princess who was beneficial to him. What did she mean by beneficial to him? Naturally, his mother didn't give up and wanted him to fight for her. But he didn't want to fight for it. The person she cared about the most had slipped by her side, and he had even let her know such an unbearable scene. What else was there for her to fight for? It would be better to be an idle king in this life. Why should she fall into that pool of mud? The pain and sadness in his heart almost overflowed his eyes. He raised his head hard to hide the tears in his eyes. Even if she was so seriously injured, he couldn't ask or see her. In fact, he really didn't have any thoughts at the moment. He was just worried about her safety. He originally thought that if she married his third brother, even if she couldn't get the final glory, she would be comfortable in the end. Now it seemed that it was not necessarily the case. His third brother was involved in the center of power. What should she do? She was still so young, even younger than him. How could she withstand such a thing? If it were him, would she not be in such a predicament? Chu Liuqin's breathing involuntarily quickened, and his eyes slowly lit up. After what happened to Xiao Yanru, it was the first time that he had changed and was no longer a dull gray man. In fact, did he still have some use? He calmed himself down and showed a trace of firmness in his eyes. Let's go, I'm going to see my mother. After that, he strode to concubine Ming's palace. Xiao Liuzi was stunned at first, but then he saw that his master was much more energetic. He was so excited that his eyes immediately turned red. This was the first time in a long time that the prince showed such an expression. This was really great. As Chu Liuxin's henchman, how could he not understand his master's thoughts? Your Highness, wait for me. Xiao Liuzi wiped away his tears and chased after him. In any case, at least the prince regained his spirit at this time, which was already very good. The things in the court had little to do with Xiao Wanru. She was still recovering from her injury. The medicine made by Mingxiu Nun and Dr. Qi together was very effective. She had basically recovered in the past few days. When she attacked him, she also knew how far she should go. At that time, she looked scary, but in fact, she was not as seriously injured as she looked. She had nothing to do these days, so she left everything to Chu Luchen and was very leisurely. Yesterday, Zhao Shiran sent someone to tell her that he would come to check on her condition today and asked if she could come over. Before Chu Luchen returned to the mansion, the gate of Prince Chen's mansion was very tightly guarded. Even the people of Marquis Xing's mansion were not allowed to enter. Rui and Great Elder Princess came over in person, so Zhao Shiran could not come in before. Xiao Wanru's body was almost recovered. Next, she just needed to take a good rest, so she answered Zhao Shiran's words and asked her to come over today. Zhao Shiran was not the only one who came, but also Xiao Caihuan and another woman, who was Zhao Shiran's biological sister, second Miss Xiao Shiqiong. After they were led to Xiao Wanru's courtyard, Xiao Wanru met them. After saluting her, they took their seats respectively. Is Princess Chen's body better? Zhao Shiran looked at Xiao Wanru with concern and asked, I have always wanted to come here before, but I was delayed because of my husband's matter. In fact, they were rejected by Prince Chen's mansion. Zhao Shiran's words could be regarded as a reconciliation between the two families. After all, it was very rude of Prince Chen's mansion to refuse the visit of Princess Chen's maiden family. I'm fine. Is my brother feeling better? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. My husband is much better, so he is recuperating now. He said that there will be an imperial examination in 3 years, so he can calm down and study hard in the study. In fact, it is not all bad. Zhao Shiran said with a wry smile. He could only say this now. Infanta Yuan An's matter was left unsettled in the end. Originally, he wanted Xiao Wanru to stand up for him, but Xiao Wanru had an accident. At this time, he certainly could not use this matter to force Xiao Wanru. Zhao Shiran did not mention it again sensibly. Brother, are you going to take the imperial examination? Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked with a smile, why haven't I heard about it before? Although Xiao Huan had a good reputation and was said to be talented, Marquis Xing's mansion had never expressed the intention to let Xiao Huan take the imperial examination. In fact, they were waiting for an opportunity for him to inherit the title of Marquis Xing's mansion and then rise to the top in this position. With Xiao Huan's talent, it was indeed easy for him to be appreciated by the emperor. In the last life, Xiao Huan had done this. It was indeed the path taken by most people to take the imperial examination and then become an official. However, it was the practice of the descendants of aristocratic families to inherit the title of nobility and then develop a great career. In particular, it was easier for Xiao Huan, who could inherit the title of nobility, to stand out. Among the descendants of aristocratic families, there were many good-for-nothings and few promising ones. If Xiao Huan took this path, he could be more noticed by the emperor and his official career would be smoother. A man's talent can only be expanded after passing the imperial examination. Zhao Shiran explained. After that, in order to be more persuasive, he added, my father took the imperial examination all the way through. Minister Zhao did take the imperial examination all the way through. The Zhao family was also an aristocratic family. However, Minister Zhao was not the eldest son of lineal descent and had no right to inherit the title of nobility, so he focused on studying. Fortunately, Minister Zhao had been smart since he was a child. After passing the imperial examination, he had a bright future. Now he was much better than his elder brother who had inherited the title of nobility. It could be considered very inspirational. Zhao Shiran's words showed Xiao Huan's determination and his intention not to compete with Xiao Yuanhao for the title of heir of duke. Brother, it is indeed a good idea to take the imperial examination. If you need anything, just tell me. Prince Chen's mansion may have it. Xiao Wanru said gently with her expression unchanged. That's great. There are not many books in Marquis Xing's mansion before. Prince Chen's mansion may really have it. At that time, I may have to trouble you, Your Highness. Zhao Shiran stood up to thank her and bowed deeply to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru hurriedly asked Yujie to hold her back and said, you are too polite. It's nothing. Chapter 11:18. It's the best that Princess Chen can help us at this time. It can also let people see that there is no estrangement between our mansion and Prince Chen's mansion. Zhao Shiran straightened up with the help of Lin Mengya, and suddenly his eyes turned red. Sister, don't be sad. Zhao Shiqiong hurriedly stood up and took her hand to comfort her in a low voice. Xiao Wanru frowned and raised her watery eyes slightly. Is someone gossiping like this? No, no one said that. I just thought so. Zhao Shiran felt that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly turned his head and wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes with a handkerchief. He shook his head and forced a smile. Princess, I was rude. It's just that the mansion has been a little cold recently, so I said it out loud. The inner courtyard of Marquis Xing's mansion was indeed deserted at the moment. Old Madame was not here, and Madame Jiang was locked up. There were only Zhao Shiran and the mother and daughter of the third branch left. The third madam was used to being indifferent, so it was indeed much more deserted than before. Princess. Zhao Shiqiong suddenly opened her mouth and said hesitantly. What's the matter, Miss Xiao? Xiao Wanru looked at Zhao Shiqiong with interest. Compared with Zhao Shiran, Zhao Shiqiong was more beautiful and charming. When she looked at people with her beautiful eyes, she seemed to be a little delicate, but it was not very obvious and would not make people feel that she was too attractive. This kind of seductive look was the most subtle and most attractive. Second sister. Zhao Shiran's expression became stern as he shouted at Zhao Shiqiong. Zhao Shiqiong hesitated for a moment and glanced at her sister. In the end, she didn't say anything and lowered her head. I'm fine. I just want to take a walk outside. Is that okay? All the people present were from Marquis Xing's mansion. Although Zhao Shiqiong was Zhao Shiran's younger sister, she was indeed an outsider here. It was sensible of her to want to walk outside so that it was convenient for them to talk. Xiao Wanru knew that she didn't want to say this, but since she didn't want to say it, she didn't want to force her, so she nodded and said, Chu Lu, take second Miss Xiao to the garden. Chu Lu answered and came out. After bowing to Zhao Shiqiong, she left with Zhao Shiqiong. First sister-in-law, if you have any difficulties, you can tell me. Xiao Wanru looked at Zhao Shiran, who had sat down again, and said softly. Actually. Zhao Shiran hesitated for a moment and looked a little hesitant. He looked up at Xiao Wanru with a little uneasiness in his eyes. First sister-in-law, please go ahead. Xiao Wanru didn't force her but added. Zhao Shiran composed herself and raised her head again as if she had made up her mind. Princess Chen, in fact, it's not that I can't tell you about this. Father-in-law, he wants to marry a new person. After saying this, Zhao Shiran's face turned as red as blood. After all, she was talking about what had happened in Xiao Jing's room. As his wife, she had no right to talk about such things. A newcomer? Xiao Wanru asked in confusion. Since she had already said it, the rest was not that difficult. Zhao Shiran pinched the handkerchief and said, I heard that she has been with Eunuch for a long time. Eunuch said that there is no elder in the mansion now, and I am a young daughter-in-law and not very sensible, so I want to bring that person over, and a daughter, the woman named Anyang. Xiao Wanru immediately thought of that woman. She had forgotten about her before. Last time, she came to Prince Chen's mansion and said that she knew something important about her parents. This woman was not ordinary. Originally, this kind of thing should be solved by my mother-in-law or old madam. But now my mother-in-law. Old madam doesn't care about it. I really don't know what to do, so I want to discuss it with Princess Chen, but I'm afraid that it's inappropriate. Zhao Shiran lowered her head and said in one go. This matter was really difficult for her. It was really disgraceful for her to say that her father-in-law kept a mistress and wanted to marry her into the mansion. Even though it was Xiao Wanru in front of her and she was also a married daughter of Marquis Xing's mansion, Zhao Shiran still felt very uncomfortable. Xiao Caihuan moved her head slightly. She had been lowering her head since she entered the door. She raised her head slightly and glanced at Zhao Shiran. She really didn't know about the matter of the second branch. Has this matter been reported to old madam? Xiao Wanru said calmly. My father-in-law said that old madam is cultivating in seclusion, so it's not a big deal to disturb her. He asked me to prepare 2 tables of wine for him. He also said that Princess Chen had met her, so she had agreed long ago. Zhao Shiran moved her body uneasily and blushed in embarrassment. In this situation, she didn't know whether to object or agree. Even though Zhao Shiran thought she was smart, she felt that she had never heard of such a thing. As a daughter-in-law, what could she say? Especially when Xiao Hua and had agreed. But as a daughter-in-law, should she be in charge of this matter? It was obvious that second grandma was in charge of it. What was wrong with it? She shouldn't be the one to deal with it, right? She had met him last time and he had agreed. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. Xiao Jing was determined to make use of her. At that time, he might think that she had found a wife for him. At present, the matter of Chu Luchen had just been brought up in the imperial court, and all the civil and military officials in the imperial court were staring at Prince Chen's mansion. At this time, if she said such words, wasn't it asking her to destroy Chu Luchen? As a daughter-in-law, Zhao Shiran had no right to speak about Xiao Jing's matter, but as a niece, she had no right to speak about it. Xiao Jing was obviously shifting the blame to her and letting her divert others' attention. He was really affectionate to his mother. But was he such a person? For so many years, if he was really such a person, how could he let the mother and daughter wander outside? In any case, even the illegitimate daughter of Marquis Xing's mansion had more chances to marry into a noble family than an ordinary girl. It was said that the daughter had reached adulthood. At this time, she returned to the family and would inevitably be discussed by others if she remarried. It was not easy for her to get a good marriage. If she returned to the family earlier, after a period of settling, and with the same upbringing as other misses, fewer people would talk about it, and it would be easier for her to get married. My father-in-law also said that he wants to marry into the mansion as a co-wife. Zhao Shiran murmured again. This time, Xiao Caihuan also raised her head and looked at Zhao Shiran in astonishment. She only thought that this second uncle was crazy. It was so easy to get a co-wife, and she was a daughter from another family. She had been raised outside for so many years. At first glance, she could tell that she was not from a good family. How could she be a co-wife? Second uncle really dared to say that. Xiao Wanru took a deep breath and then said slowly, "Go and ask old madam to go back to the mansion." What? Zhao Shiran said in surprise. Go and ask old madam to go back to the mansion. Xiao Wanru said with certainty. No matter what Xiao Jing wanted to do, only old madam could suppress him on the surface now. If even old madam agreed to this matter, it seemed to be quite suspicious. She was testing old madam's attitude and Xiao Jing's. How could she not avenge her parents? At present, Chu Luqian was in charge of the affairs in the mansion, so she could be considered innocent. Since she was free, she could continue to investigate. But old madam. Empress Dowager wants. Zhao Shiran stammered. Of course, old madam did not go to the Yuhui nunnery willingly. Now it was not so easy for her to come back. I will go to the palace to meet the Empress Dowager tomorrow and I will talk about this matter. If the Empress Dowager agrees, I will ask someone to inform you. Go and ask old madam to come back immediately. Without old madam, it will not be easy for my sister-in-law to make decisions in the mansion. Xiao Wanru already had an idea in her mind. Since old madam was secretly punished by the Empress Dowager, of course, she had to inform the Empress Dowager. Although the Empress Dowager might not care too much about it, she had to tell this matter to the Empress Dowager in case others got hold of it. Will the Empress Dowager agree? Zhao Shiran also knew that this was the best way, but he was still a little worried. He looked at Xiao Wanru and asked. There was no hope for Madame Jiang. Considering the hatred between her and Zhao Shiran would not mention her. Moreover, she did not want Madame Jiang to come out. It was better for her to be locked up forever as the wife. In this way, at least the position of the eldest legitimate son of Xiao Hua then could be guaranteed. It should be possible. Wait for my news tomorrow. Xiao Wanru nodded. Thank you, Your Highness. If it were not for you, I don't know what to do. I can't make decisions on this matter. Zhao Shiran breathed a sigh of relief and said to Xiao Wanru gratefully. As long as old madam came back, no matter how old madam dealt with this matter, it had nothing to do with her, and it would not cause gossip. You are welcome, first sister. Marquis Xing's mansion is my mother's family. How can I leave my mother's family alone? Xiao Wanru replied softly and smiled slightly. Fifth sister, I. Xiao Caihuan finally spoke. This was the first time she had spoken since she entered the room. She looked very hesitant and uneasy, and her face was red. It seemed that she wanted to say something, but she could not say it for a while. What's the matter, third sister? Xiao Wanru raised her eyes and asked. I'm fine. My mother asked me to ask you when you will return to the mansion. She said that you haven't returned to the mansion for a long time. Xiao Caihuan said with some difficulty, but her words were not as relaxed as before. It should not be what she had wanted to say at the beginning. At present, in the inner courtyard of Marquis Xing's mansion, the third madam was the only Changsheng. However, because they were separated by a branch, and the third madam had always followed the second madam, she was not close to Xiao Wanru. When old madam comes back, I will go back to have a look. Xiao Wanru gently held her injured arm and said with a smile. Okay, then let's wait for fifth sister to come back. Xiao Caihuan lowered her head again, bit her lip, and hid the struggle in her eyes. Zhao Shiran looked at her in surprise. This third miss was brought here by the third madam when she was about to go out. She said that she would accompany her to Prince Chen's mansion to see Princess Chen. Now it seemed that there was something going on. What had happened to the third madam recently? Zhao Shiran had been keeping an eye on Marquis Xing in the past, so he really did not know what had happened to the third madam. After thinking about it, he found that it was not a big deal. Could it be that they really just wanted to ask Zhao Shiran to go back and get in touch with Xiao Wanru? At present, Princess Chen was not just Princess Chen. There was a fierce dispute in the court, and her father said that Prince Chen also had a reason to fight for the throne. Nanny Yu suddenly came in a hurry, walked up to Xiao Wanru and whispered something in her ear. Xiao Wanru suddenly raised her head, glanced at Zhao Shiran calmly, and then nodded. Zhao Shiran was shocked and hurriedly lowered his head, feeling uneasy. Chapter 11-19. After glancing at Zhao Shiran, Nanny Yu left in a hurry. It was just a small episode, and no one seemed to take it seriously. After continuing to talk, Zhao Shiqiong came in and sat beside Zhao Shiran. She held a handkerchief in her hand and lowered her head with a blush. Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes glanced at Zhao Shiqiong's pink cheeks calmly, and there was a deep look in her eyes. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhao Shiran and Xiao Caihuan stood up and said goodbye. Zhao Shiqiong reacted the slowest. When they stood up and said goodbye, she realized that her sister had pulled her just now and stood up hurriedly. Xiao Wanru asked Yujie to send them out. After they left, Xiao Wanru turned her eyes to Chu Lu. Your Highness, I really didn't mean to take second Miss Xiao there. Second Miss Xiao heard that the bamboo forest in our Prince Chen's mansion was good, so she insisted that I take her there. I thought that the prince would not come back so early. Chu Lu knelt down with a plop and said anxiously. Get up first. Xiao Wanru nodded and said calmly. Chu Lu stood up, crossed her hands in front of her chest, and said aggrievedly, I took second Miss Xiao to see the bamboo forest in our mansion. Second Miss Xiao said that she heard that there were a few purple bamboos from Huaguang Temple in it, so I took her there. I didn't expect to meet the prince. Your Highness, I really didn't mean to take her there. There was a small bamboo forest in Prince Chen's mansion, but it happened to be very close to Chu Liuchen's study. It was just behind the study's courtyard. There were a few purple bamboos from Huaguang Temple in it. Originally, there were only a few, but now they had grown into a small piece, which was also a scenery of Prince Chen's mansion. In fact, these purple bamboos had not been planted for a long time. It was said that Xiao Wanru liked the purple bamboos from Huaguang Temple 3 years ago. It had only been 3 years since then. Prince Chen's mansion was very careful because there were few bamboos. They were not inferior to the purple bamboos of Huaguang Temple for many years. However, they were not as old as the purple bamboos of Huaguang Temple, so they were not so tough when making things. At least from the appearance, they were equally excellent. Chu Liuchen seldom met outsiders because of his poor health. Not many people knew that there was such a bamboo forest in Prince Chen's mansion. This so-called hearsay was actually quite controversial. Originally, Zhao Shiqiong's visit today was a little unreasonable, but now, there seemed to be a reason. What did second Miss Xiao say to the prince? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. Second Miss Xiao only bowed to him. Before she could say anything, His Highness left. Chu Lu thought for a while and answered. She felt very relieved at that time. This second Miss Xiao didn't avoid the prince when she saw him. Instead, she went up to greet him. Chu Lu, who didn't have any complaints about her, had a lot of complaints. Although Wang Ye's status was noble, at that time, he did not need to walk over to greet him. He only needed to greet him from a distance. The two of them did not meet head-on. It was also for this reason that she had asked the little servant girl beside her to talk to Nanny Yu about this matter, so that the princess would have an early idea of what to do. Then you came back? Xiao Wanru asked. Your Highness only took a glance at her before leaving. Second young Miss Xiao blushed and stayed in the bamboo forest for a long time before following me back, Chu Lu said. This matter didn't seem to be a big deal. It was just a family member accidentally bumped into the prince. The two of them didn't say a word, so it was not a big deal. However, Chu Lu was very vigilant. She felt that it was a mistake to bring second Miss Xiao there today. She would never forget seeing second Miss Xiao's shy and charming look. Even though the prince only took a glance at her, second Miss Xiao was already so gentle and charming. It could be seen that she was a thoughtful person. Even if it was a spur-of-the-moment idea, it was indeed an idea. Next time someone comes and wants to see the garden, just do it in the inner garden. Xiao Wanru already understood in her heart and gave an order. There was a trace of gloominess in her watery eyes. There had never been such a thing before. It was because of Chu Liuchen's health and his awkward identity. Now that these things were not a problem and even had the momentum to soar, some people couldn't sit still. It was really ridiculous that the second lineal daughter of the minister's mansion wanted to be a concubine. Of course, Xiao Wanru believed that they wanted her to be the princess. Yes, Your Highness, I understand. Yujie nodded and said softly, Your Highness, I think second Miss Xiao looks a little like you. What do you mean? Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked with interest. I just think so. In fact, there is not too much reason. I just think that second Miss Xiao is beautiful and a little charming. She looks like a princess, Chu Lu said after thinking for a while. Chu Lu thought about it and described it. She couldn't describe this feeling at the moment. It wasn't because they looked alike. Second Miss Xiao and Wang Fei didn't look alike at all, but she felt that they were the same type. It was just that the princess was a little more outstanding than second Miss Xiao. Xiao Wanru understood. She picked up the teacup at hand with a smile, took a sip, and slowly put it down. She thought that Chu Liuchen liked her type, so she found a similar one to explore the way. She was probably the first one, but definitely not the last one. Those who looked down on Chu Liuchen in the past might rush to him one by one at this time. In addition to Chu Liuchen's appearance, Xiao Wanru believed that there would be many misses like Xiao Shiqiong. Even if she could guard against them in Prince Chen's mansion, it would be difficult to guard against them outside. Some people valued the power of Prince Chen's mansion, some valued the future situation of Prince Chen's mansion, and some valued Chu Liuchen himself. A handsome and elegant young man could often win the hearts of many girls. Even in the past, many misses had thrown themselves at him. What's more, Chu Liuchen's original shortcomings seemed to have disappeared. Pay more attention in the future. Don't bring any outsiders to Prince Chen's place, especially the wife's family members. Xiao Wanru's eyes became soft, and there was a hint of understanding in her black and white eyes. At this time, she couldn't let anyone drag Chu Liuchen down. Zhao's mansion. Minister Zhao's two daughters were not easy to deal with. What did Minister Zhao want to do? It seemed to have something to do with Marquis Xing's mansion. She was really looking forward to it. Only one carriage came from Marquis Xing's mansion. Zhao Shiran, Zhao Shiqiong, and Xiao Caihuan all got in the carriage. The carriage was very spacious, and it was not crowded for 3 people to sit in it. Zhao Shiqiong blushed. She looked at Xiao Caihuan and wanted to talk to Zhao Shiran, but it was not convenient, so she could only hold the handkerchief in her hand and lower her head. She seemed to see the extremely handsome face just now, and her fingers couldn't help cramping. How could someone be so handsome? Even though he just glanced at her, she blushed and her heart beat faster. It turned out that this was Prince Chen. This was Prince Chen. Prince Chen was so outstanding. If she had known this, she would have agreed to marry Prince Chen anyway. In fact, at the very beginning, Minister Zhao had taken a fancy to Prince Chen and mentioned it to Zhao Shiqiong. He said that if she agreed, he would find a way to send someone to the Empress Dowager. At that time, Zhao Shiqiang refused without hesitation and told Minister Zhao that she heard that Prince Chen was a dying patient. She even cried and blamed Minister Zhao for not loving her and wanted her to be a widow. Now that Prince Chen was in good health, she was also a little tempted, so she listened to Minister Zhao and entered Prince Chen's mansion to see Prince Chen. She didn't expect that Prince Chen was such a handsome person. The image of a handsome and elegant child was more outstanding than any man she had seen before. Although this handsome and elegant Prince Chen just glanced at her coldly and walked past her as if she was nothing, Zhao Shiqiang's heart still beat faster. If it were Prince Chen, she would be willing to be his concubine. She regretted it. If she had promised her father, would she have been the current Princess Chen? It was said that Prince Chen loved Princess Chen very much. If she hadn't heard the rumors, she would have been the one enjoying all this now. She was so regretful that she scratched her ears and cheeks. She had a lot to say to Zhao Shiran, but Xiao Caihuan was beside her, so she could only bear it. Fifth sister won't like it. In the quiet carriage, Xiao Caihuan suddenly said. Zhao Shiqiang suddenly raised her head and looked at Xiao Caihuan. Zhao Shiran also frowned. Xiao Caihuan's eyes fell on Zhao Shiqiang's shy face and continued, Fifth sister won't like it. If fifth sister doesn't like it, Prince Chen won't like it either. Third Miss Xiao, what do you mean? Zhao Shiqiang's face was red and hot, and she felt ashamed and annoyed as if her thoughts had been seen through. You can ignore what I mean, second Miss Xiao. As long as fifth sister doesn't mean it, you can write it down. Xiao Caihuan looked at her in silence, which almost made Zhao Shiqiang lower her head. But the next moment, she stared at Xiao Caihuan with an unkind look and said, Third Miss Xiao, you can eat more, but you can't talk nonsense. Second Miss Xiao is a smart person, but don't treat others as stupid. Xiao Caihuan laughed sarcastically. The appearance of second Miss Xiao was really familiar. Was she like this at the beginning? Third sister, you've gone too far. Seeing the two of them staring at each other, Zhao Shiran had to interrupt. Sister-in-law, if you think what second Miss Xiao did is right, I have nothing to say. Xiao Caihuan looked at Zhao Shiran and curled her lips coldly. Since she was released, her temper had become more and more dull. On the way here, she hadn't said a few words to Zhao Shiran, but now she had said a lot. Xiao Caihuan felt that she had done everything she could to Zhao Shiran, her sister-in-law. If Zhao Shiqiang really didn't want to hear it, it was out of her control. For the sake of the same mansion, she also warned Zhao Shiqiang. It was easy to guess what Zhao Shiqiang was thinking. She must have met Prince Chen just now, so she came back with a shy face and wanted to say something. Unfortunately, before she came back, her fifth sister had already known that the thing that Nanny Yu came in to report should be about Zhao Shiqiang. This man thought that fifth younger sister didn't know anything. Xiao Caihuan, you. Zhao Shiqiang was very angry.